Oh my goodness, everybody. This is a very exciting day for me because the 1950s human extraterrestrial contacts that occurred in Italy and in the United States fundamentally redefine what a disclosure event is. As you probably know, we are getting mainstream media acknowledgement that there is going to be some sort of UFO truth announcement. We were hearing it was going to be January, I'm sorry, I was thinking December, January. We were hearing it was going to be June 1st, where we would get a certain amount of information. Now, some of the people who I've been speaking to, who are colleagues of mine that allegedly have the cosmic top secret clearance, which again is 35 levels of need to know, above the President of the United States. That is the standard entry level security clearance that you get where you start to know what's really going on. Over the years, I've disclosed many aspects of this to you, and I wouldn't be surprised if new insiders are getting ready to come forward. I think there will probably be a number of them that will trigger concurrently with this whole process. Some of those guys are telling me that based on what they're seeing and what they think is being planned to be released, that we're only going to get approximately 1% of the information that we really want to have from a disclosure. So there's a lot of things that we've been sharing over the years, and some people have tried to undermine the credibility of certain insiders of mine, but there is a clear trend line throughout all of these different pieces of information. And that trend line suggests that we have a very robust space development. In other words, the Roswell crash apparently is real. Let's do the dramatic close-up. You like that? Everybody's been complimenting me on these close-ups, but it is actually very difficult. If you have a big screen TV, I don't want to move my face too much on the close-up, or else it's too much movement. So there's a whole etiquette to follow when you have an extreme close-up. And it makes my neck really sore. So twice of these a week is plenty. But I like to hold my head really still so it doesn't look crazy for you on the television set. Anyway, what we're now dealing with is a disclosure event that seems to be not exactly what we want. And the overview is that we actually do apparently have a robust presence in space. I actually believe that the Pete Peterson recording, I went back and listened to it again recently, he said he had been to roughly 65 different off-planet locations. And so we have apparently a number of facilities on Mars, a number of facilities on the moon. And then when you get out there, you find out that there's people everywhere. There's lots of different people. They're human looking, but they have maybe different skin color, maybe they're taller or shorter. And they've been working with our government, at least what you could call the government, for quite some time, covertly. It's just not become a kind of a commonly known thing yet that we're having all this extraterrestrial interaction. But it clearly appears that these beings do intend to make themselves known to us in the future, and they operate on a very funky set of rules that most people probably don't know, including the people in the national security state. So the simple fact that they're getting ready to do this disclosure and that they're already doing it actually changes the rules of what the ETs are able to do, because they have laws that they have to follow, just like if you signed an ironclad contract and the only thing you can do is to follow the contract. This is the same concept. In other words, they have to follow these laws. They have to make sure that what you could call in Star Trek the prime directive is preserved. So when I first started to have what appeared to be extraterrestrial contact occurring telepathically, that was in 1996, and it occurred after 4 solid years of writing my dreams down every morning and actually learning the language of the dreams and being able to decipher the meanings. And this is a very important point. Learning how to actually communicate with your higher self, for lack of a better term, to do it directly and to get direct information, that's an incredibly valuable process. So that is one of the things that we will again be covering in this year's Ascension Mystery School 3.0. We're calling it Gateway to Galactic Mind. Please go check us out at ascensionmysteryschool.com, because that discussion is much more interesting and much more broad than I'm able to do in these public videos, there's things that I want to share that, frankly, I just don't feel like doing it publicly. And it's new stuff. It's great stuff. So even if you've seen my material before, we are giving you a lot of new stuff. We had a lot of incredible compliments on the first one. And I actually showed in the first week's class, by the way, that Proxima Centauri, our sun's closest neighbor, actually did have a solar flash only 4 days later than the Mayan calendar end date. And I only did that math recently based upon the calculation of March 24th, 2017 being when the light was first seen, and then the exact distance in light years down to 3 decimal points for Proxima Centauri, which is, I guess, 4.242 light years away, something like that. Anyway, if you go back and watch Sunday's show, which you would have to do by subscribing, of course, it is very, very amazing, because only on Sunday morning before I did the show did I actually calculate it precisely. And this is an event that caused our next door neighbor, Proxima Centauri, is part of a trinary system. You've heard of Alpha Centauri. Well, there's Alpha Centauri A and B, and they're very large, and then Proxima is much, much smaller. That may account for it being called the dark sun in ancient mythology. There's nothing else there that our astronomers have found that's closer to us than Alpha Centauri. So if we are orbiting another star, which I think is going to be the solution to all this in terms of the grand physics puzzle, that's another thing I'll be talking about in the class. If they are our closest neighbor, it appears that we have some gravitational capture with them, that we are orbiting them, and if some kind of galactic energy wave is coming in that is supposed to create a solar flash, or at least it's expected to in so many ancient prophecies that we've been discussing here, and you're going to have some more today from the 1950s. If this is true, if this is what the sun is really going to do, then everything else is insignificant. Everything else is insignificant. The only thing that really matters is the fact that this is going to happen, and what are the teachings behind it. And the teachings, again, are that if you want to stay with the Earth as it goes through this metamorphic process, you're going to have to be at least a little bit over 50% more focused on loving and helping other people rather than manipulating and controlling them. And if you think that you already are over 50%, this is not based on your opinion. This is based on absolute truth that apparently they can measure with what they call the spiraling line of light in the Law of One series. It's an absolute measurement of how far you've progressed as vibrationally, I guess. So literally, the beings will get an exact increment of how far you made it. So you might tomorrow decide to forgive someone who you hadn't been willing to forgive before, and that could actually be the tipping point for you between whether this will be something that you will be benefiting from, or where you're part of the great relocation, the Noah's Ark thing, where they get put on another planet. Over here real quick, in my new book, Awakening in the Dream, as you see right here, a little bit out of focus, I go through a lot of this stuff. So if you can't afford the class, but you would love to engage this material more, I've said this almost every time, but please, again, the book's like, I don't know, a little over $20. And we're not getting rich writing this. The books are the least profitable part of my business. The reason I do it is so that it gets out in 15 languages, and that you have a hardcover and a paperback after a year. Paperback's coming up pretty soon. And I really want the message to get out. And so I am long-winded. These books are over 500 pages long. That I write as much as they will let me. There's a certain commercial limit to how far they'll let you write a book, and then they say, well, now the book's too big and nobody's going to buy it. So I push it right up to the line, about 576 pages. But it's not going to feel like it's a long read. It's a very fascinating book, and actually I had a guy recently tell me that the main thing he wishes is that I had more time to discuss each topic. But we crammed a lot of stuff in there. There's sacred science, all the stuff about the pyramid timeline, extraterrestrials migrating to Earth from Mars, the exploded planet Maldek, and how those people got put here, and they had to go through a kind of a karmic alleviation process where they became what we could think of as Neanderthals, that their bodies were not actually made properly for a third density experience, and that was the karma that they all had to go through for blowing up their planet, apparently. The planet was supposedly a super Earth, much larger than Earth, that was a Garden of Eden, and had another Earth orbiting it that was what we call Mars. Supposedly, when this planet blew up, Mars was also destroyed by the impact. And there's a really great, Thomas Van Flandern has the exploded planet hypothesis. And he is a PhD, credited. And he basically went back and looked and said, look, Mars definitely seems to have been hit by some massive impact as if it was a captured moon of a bigger planet. And in fact, there's a whole lot of stuff. Richard C. Hoagland came up with the Mars tidal model. So if you look at where the liquid water is on Mars today, it all clusters on two sides of the moon. Well, planet now, but it was a moon. So the moon on Earth, if you think about it, we always see the same part of the moon in the night sky. And that's because of gravitational capture. So over a long period of time, if the moon had water, because of this gravitational capture, you'd see more water on the side facing the Earth and more water on the side opposite the Earth. It's some kind of a gravitational effect that causes this. We see exactly that on Mars today. We see two big spots of liquid water. There's still liquid water on the surface, and they're clustered into these two areas that are consistent with the Mars tidal model, that Mars was a captured moon of a larger planet. That planet exploded. All of the debris that we would expect to see from a planet that blows up is there in what we call the asteroid belt, as well as things like the Kuiper belt and the Oort cloud. This was a tremendous explosion, very rocky, caused incredible damage all throughout our solar system. Iapetus on Saturn is another moon that got very heavily blasted by this debris and has a distinctly different appearance from one side to the other. If you go take a look at that, you can actually kind of see the blast. So, with all of this being said, it appears that there are people in our national security state who have been dealing with extraterrestrials face to face since at least the 1940s or 1950s. And there are good guys and bad guys. So some divisions work with the good ETs, some divisions work with the bad ETs. And I've been consistently impressed, let's go over here. I've been consistently impressed by the fact that these guys are bored when they talk about it. They're not excited. If you find the real people, they are very matter of fact about what happened. And when you start to sit down with real people, you hear a whole lot of things that keep coming up over and over again the same way from different people. And that is what I like to see. I like to see the compelling links where different people who have never met each other somehow independently experience the same stuff. So we still have a lot of material I've withheld to be able to figure out who's real. And also we have a vetting process where we have insiders who can tell us what their opinion is of various information that comes out and the provenance of that information. So I have done my best to endorse the information that I think is credible. It is certainly absolutely possible that there could be other credible insiders out there who I haven't encountered yet. But I do my best to try to let you know about the stuff that is real to me. So we're going to be going through this process. If all of this stuff is true, we're going to be going through this ascension process. And again, I'm still kind of recovering from the buzz of actually just doing the math of March 14th, I believe it is, or March 24th, 2017, when this happened. Yeah, it's 24th. And then 4.242 or 424 light years, it's 242, I think. So I calculated the exact number of days, because you can't use months, you got to use days. So the exact number of days, and sure enough, it came out to December 25th, 2012. So it's only 4 days off from December 21st, 2012, which is the exact mathematical end of the Mayan calendar. If you've seen my other work, then you'll know, and I'm probably going to do this again in the online course. In fact, I'm quite certain that I will. I will show you in the class how the Mayan calendar, each level of what it's counting, is an astronomical cycle. This again is a solid proof for extraterrestrial involvement in human affairs, because first of all, one of the most amazing things that most people are not aware of is the Mayan calendar. If you actually look at its length, I believe it's about 5,125 years, give or take. The whole length of one Mayan calendar, right? Which would be 13 of these Baktuns that are, I believe, 144,000 days long. And so when you add all this up, however it ends up, the math has been done, but I might be getting it a little bit wrong here. But anyway, everybody can find out the Mayan calendar is about 5,125 days long, something like this. 5 of these Mayan calendar cycles perfectly add up to the 25,000-year cycle that I've been talking about in previous iterations of this class. The math is incredibly precise, and when I start breaking it down for you, what you will then see is that all of the planets in our solar system are very precisely connected to each other. The orbits are not separate. It is as if our solar system is a giant clock and that there are gears in the clock, and each planet's orbit is like one of the gears. And the gears are all organized in a way where they work completely and totally in sync with one another. Their movements to one another affect everything else that's going on. And the second, the unit of time that we call 1 second, ends up becoming a very, very important universal time quantum, which I will argue in the class is actually the heartbeat of our sun and all other stars, that they actually are giving off waves that are in increments of 1 exact second. And all of the planetary orbits, by the way, can be solved with using the second as your time counting device. And this goes back to, believe it or not, the Sumerians. So you have the oldest civilization on Earth. You have clay tablets that they wrote these things on, so they're literally writing everything down with mud. So with the Sumerian cuneiform, the NASA scientist Dr. Maurice Chatelain actually found this one number that was very fascinating. And it is a number that expresses all of the different orbits of all the planets in our solar system as one common denominator. So that's going to be a lot of fun to go through that stuff, but not all the class is technical and mathematical. There's also lots of other stuff. But anyway, apart from whatever is going on with the secret space program and with ETs in the 1950s, it appears that these ETs, they call themselves gardeners, and they have a very important role in making sure that life on Earth is preserved and that we don't get blown up. So what do these gardeners actually want? They essentially are telling us, as I've said in some of the previous classes here, that loving energy is the essence of creation, that the cosmos itself is made from an intelligent energy. And even though certain folks identify as Luciferians and want to be believing that the God that all the Abrahamic religions teach is real is only a half-god or demiurge, and that the real God is somehow far away, and they say it's Sophia, but then it kind of turns out to be Lucifer. So I don't believe that the visible universe is some cheated trick by a bad, evil half-god. I believe that the visible manifest universe is actually a really wonderful thing that isn't just some philosophical dead end that's meant to trap your soul. I think that if you really want to harmonize with the universe, it's good to understand that these laws are in place and they really do work, and it's essentially karma. So a lot of people don't realize that karma is totally exact and you don't get to make the rules. There's higher beings that govern our affairs on Earth, and they make the rules. And so these guardians also ensure that the planet is not going to be destroyed. And they're ensuring that we're steered towards a golden age type of timeline. So with that in mind, everything unpleasant that is going on now is not something where people are acting on their own free will. When you look at the unpleasant global things that are happening in the world today, whether you're talking about the bad guys or whatever iteration of the good guys, and there's many, many factions of what I've called the Alliance, and they have different ideas about how to do things. Either side of this war is on Earth is completely apart from the many different extraterrestrial civilizations that are here on Earth and are ensuring that we will have a positive, loving, amazing future, and that the negative is exposed and defeated. So if you remember in some of the previous classes, I talked about Zoroastrian prophecy, and that there is this end time that they call Frasho Kareti, and that people like you and me become empowered through their own spiritual practices, and that evil is gradually and steadfastly defeated by the ongoing efforts of the just, which means people who align with this loving consciousness. Then I also showed you Edgar Cayce reading 3976-15, which among many other very, very exciting things, it said that the rottenness of the negative elite will be exposed on a great level. And he also said if America does not turn towards the ideals of service to others, then again must the hated people of Mongolia rise. Sure looks like that's what's going on right now. It's reached a tipping point, and so these prophecies are very exciting. Edgar Cayce is a great example of somebody who appears to have been in touch with benevolent ETs. They put over 14,000 documented readings that are still surviving, another 20,000 that got lost in a house fire from Edgar Cayce, if you want to hear what these beings actually have to tell us. And they taught us a lot of really cool stuff about diet, what to eat, what not to eat, lifestyle, and a whole lot of interesting therapies that turn people's medical conditions around when they otherwise were going to die. And again, Cayce didn't know anything. All he did under hypnosis is go into a deep trance with the name and the address of someone, and then his voice starts talking, and his voice knows what's wrong with the person, even though they're halfway across the country, let's say, and they never told him anything. No front loading. If they have a problem with their kidneys, it immediately starts talking about their kidneys, pinpoints exactly what's wrong with the kidneys, and then talks about the mind-body-spirit connection of why that kidney problem is happening. Because kidneys, as you probably know, are metaphysically associated with fear. Lungs are associated with grief. And there's various things. If you read the Louise L. Hay books, like You Can Heal Your Life is one of the titles, Louise Hay did a really good job of breaking down what the Cayce reading said about which parts of the body symbolize which psychological issues. So I do recommend her work. Anyway, back to this guy now. The real essence of what these beings keep telling us is that we are being guided through an ascension process here on Earth, and most people have no idea that this is what's going on. So the part where most people have no idea what's going on is what they call the illusion. The real reason we're here is to grow spiritually. The real reason we're here is to ascend if we have progressed enough to do it. So any planet that you get born on, anywhere in the universe, you go through third density, which is what we're in now, where you don't know anything. And you make mistakes and you experience karma for those mistakes, and usually you don't recognize that the karma that you receive has anything to do with your actions. But the higher beings are trying to find ways to get you to understand causality, to get you to actually understand that when you take actions of either thoughts or actions of negative things against others, or against yourself even, that there are balancing things that happen to you that seem to be bad luck or random coincidences. They're not coincidences. So karma also works on a global scale. And therefore, the people who have been doing things that are not in alignment with universal truth of this forgiveness, patience, kindness, love, it's not that they should be held accountable. They must be held accountable, and they must be held accountable in a way where the world gets to know what they've done. And so the 1950s extraterrestrials, as you're going to see today, told us that this is what's going to happen, that there are cycles that must not be interrupted, that are absolutely essential for the growth of our human civilization here on Earth. And I believe we are going through the final stage of those cycles right now, and this is all part of a massive awakening process. Since one of the narratives that I've been tracking throughout this whole video series with you is what the heck is going on in that tiny little city on the East Coast, well, big stuff may be about to go down or not. So let's go back to the slide. And the really bigger question is, what is really going on over there? We have been getting a lot of reports that, first of all, the lights are off at the WH all the time. There are journalists, citizen journalists, who have been trying to call it, and they don't even have a voicemail. Nobody's going in there. The lights aren't on at night. But now, more recently, we're hearing all this report of lots of activity, helicopters coming and going, staff coming and going from these two major locations. Now, one particular insider who again is very public, and I forget what he's up to now, almost 200,000 subscribers, he seems to be leaking some good stuff, and we've talked about him in previous weeks. So there's there's only really two major ideas that I've seen going around in terms of what the heck is all the work being done for? What is going on there? There's door number one and there's door number two. Door number one, and again, it could be something that I haven't thought of, nobody's thought of. There could be a door number 3 or 4, but the two major theories that everybody has is, number one, this could be that that both of these facilities are already being set up for some sort of court cases that will be taking place there. And I'm going to avoid using certain words now because they're probably looking for those. So anyway, what we're dealing with is one theory where there are renovations going on, or perhaps people have already been put through a court case. There may have already been things going on. There may have already been trials. They may already be filmed. They may have been happening in these two buildings. That's one possibility. The other possibility, door number 2, to me, is equally plausible. Because door number 2, wouldn't you think these people might try something like this? Let me just run this past you. What if everybody is supposedly in these buildings and then they just get wiped out? And then theoretically, all of the people who were about to be arrested no longer exist. And maybe they would even stage it where it looks like, it's them. And there's maybe even, remains that look like them or would be close enough that you would think, or it's just so badly damaged that, you don't know if anybody's really there. Or they tell you that everybody's gone, but they're really not. And what are they doing? They're probably getting into a submarine and scooting off somewhere. That's entirely plausible, because if you think about it, everybody's saying, watch out for big, big, horrible things that you don't know what they are, and they're bad. So maybe it's going to be an ET type of thing. Maybe it's the alien card, right? But then the alien card is that there's a big pyramid in the sky and a beam comes down and whoo, up goes these two symbols of the United States. Nobody's in there, and there's a lot of work going on. So one of the speculations in this line of reasoning is that the work is to install a whole lot of stuff in there that makes sure it's going to do what they want it to do. And it'll do it the right way. Probably lots of computerized controls so that if one thing doesn't go off, they got another thing, and they make sure they get the whole thing. They get it done right, and it looks really dramatic, and everybody is crying, and everybody's sad, and oh, they're all gone now. They're all gone now, so now, since they're not here anymore, we can't hold them accountable. I would definitely believe that that's possible, because you got to remember, these people are willing to do anything. So either timeline could be going on, and what we know is nobody's being able to get in there, and there's lots and lots of signs of military activity, ambulances, which again would suggest arrests and more unpleasant, like the kinetic conflict, basically. But so I want to go back to the person I was reading from before and get you up to date on what he is saying, because everything I just told you is the context for this discussion. So let's go to the slide. Okay, so first I'm going to show you the whole thing, and you can see the 3 panes that we're going to read. So this is the one I said before, and again, 107,000 members. So this is very, very public. Many, many people are seeing this, besides his own subscribers, of course. So it says, no leaks, and something big has been going on for weeks. So again, door number 1 is that the something big is like a trial and arrests and kids getting saved out of tunnels, and that could be part of it. Door number 2 is, well, what if it's actually that they're rigging everything up just like something else that happened before, where you get this spectacular traumatic event that everybody cries and everybody says, oh my God, they're all gone, and they're really not gone. Okay, so here we go. Next thing. So something big's been going on for weeks. And then remember, I read this to you. So he says that he had inside sources, someone as close to him as can be. That rules out a lot of people. That means it's a very, very good source. And I believe this. I actually do believe this. Sources at his campaign, I can't mention the person at all. After he left, no one was communicating. So that source might be a male. So I could have been wrong about it being his wife. That was what I thought last time. But actually it said he left. So One source I've had friendly conversations with has given me bits and pieces of what he's heard. I posted some of it. And again, look at this. This is a very, very heavy statement. And it kind of fits in with everything I was just telling you, doesn't it? About door number 2. Expect a V event that will take place in blankety blank that will result in a hard ML and retaliatory strikes that will somehow remove blank blank and top-ranking members of blank for you-know-what. So again, I'm sorry if you're listening to this, you do have to kind of watch everything to get it all, but you get the point. So then it said, our allies will freak out and declare ML. This event could be an FF, concerned with the power grid. It won't be like WW3, but it will end quickly. Everything that he's telling you here, we got to go there. We got to go to door number 2 because you got to think big, because they always need the element of surprise. So if we are not surprised by this, if we're talking about it now before they do it, it's a lot less of a surprise. It would still traumatize a heck of a lot of people if they actually did do something like this, and if they tried to argue that all these people are gone. But I wouldn't necessarily believe it if it happens. I wouldn't believe it at all because of these leaks that I'm reading you right now. Now back to the slide. The official account from this guy, Mike, said something very similar, and of course he also was and is very close to our guy, 45. So he says, I know the military is committed. They are not going to wait for the results of the A, you know what. They have a timeline. When simultaneous missions here and abroad are completed, which they haven't apparently done yet, so there's a wobbler here in terms of when things are going to happen. We don't know when those missions will be completed, but they're working on it, and it's probably getting to be pretty close. So when you have simultaneous missions here and abroad that are completed, then they will implement the first phase. At this point, we have a hard ML, population control, confessions, transitions, and transfer of power. I mean, this is a very, very heavy statement for the official Mike account to say, especially because there's been these litigations getting thrown around and you don't want to make statements that are misleading. So everybody is getting more and more specific in the briefings that we're hearing from these kind of sources. So let's read another one. This is the same guy I was showing you before. This is the photograph I just took. And he's actually, just since I started promoting him, you can see he's gained like 30,000 members. So now he's at 132,000. This is just since I did the show on Sunday, that he's gained almost 30,000 members. So that shows the reach that we have, folks. Anyway, this is very exciting. It was just a couple days ago that he posted this. Now the word is public. The M is planning to storm the WH. What the hell? Okay. I want to say this. It's too good. I don't believe it. Even though I've promoted this guy, I want to believe him, but I don't believe him. And I think that's the safest way to put this out so that if nothing happens, please don't blame me, okay? Because the other guy, Mike, just said, look, there's missions here and abroad that have to get completed, and those are probably wobblers. We don't really know when they're going to get done. But what he says here, it only is going to happen a couple days from now, and I have almost, as soon as you put out a date that's like this specific and this soon, it's going to be wrong. So it's not going to happen on Sunday, okay? I'd be extremely surprised if this is true. But I think we're getting in close. So anyway, let's keep reading this. Now the word is public. The M is planning to storm the WH. And again, just back, that does imply that it might not be that everything is completely gone, that it all got blown to smithereens. It could be something else, but there's probably going to be some kind of precursor event. We just don't know what it is. But at this point, if this kind of thing did happen, it would be a lot less disruptive than if it happened in January. There would be some significant concerns, including the fact that it could very well lead to essentially different aspects of the U.S. fighting with one another and dying against one another, and that is the definition of a civil conflict, right? So this doesn't feel good. I mean, there's nothing really good about this, but I want you to be aware of the chatter. Even though I don't believe that this is what's going to happen, I want you to at least read it, and I want to have aired it unless some crazy reason it actually happens this way, which I doubt. I want you to know what it said. Here we go. I was told it might happen on Sunday, May 23rd. That's like a couple days away here. But it looks like they are going in sooner to remove imposters. Expect anything. This could be it. Well, going in sooner, obviously, we're already on Thursday. But again, this could be something that you don't ever hear about. These could be covert things that are never made public. All right, now let's go back to the slide. This is one of the most important parts, because obviously this was a very secure, secret thing if it did happen. And our intel, by the way, does not line up with this. Again, back to the camera. Our intel is that they don't have a plan, and they could have done it back in January, but they didn't have the right approval. That a lot of people chickened out, and the whole thing kind of went belly up. And there are factions, at least within the alliance, that say, hey, we don't have anything planned. There's nothing we can do about this. We're not in a position to do this, and we wouldn't take any offensive action. That's what we got directly. But this person is getting something entirely different, and his source, if he's telling the truth, his source would probably be a lot better than the ones that I'm getting access to, which again is all very secondhand. I get tiny little crumbs of stuff, and then we have to figure out what it is. Nobody is sitting down and looking me in the eye, telling me anything. Essentially, I'm in the same boat that you're in. I just get little tiny things, and then I look at what's out there online, and that's mostly what I use, is the stuff that's out there online. Okay. Generals of all branches of the military met in person, obviously in a SCIF, or Secure Compartmented Information Facility. Generals of all branches met in person and agreed the U.S. is in deep peril, and they are going to, you know what, for a constitutional republic. Conflict is between socialism and Marxism versus the supporters of constitutional freedom and liberty, and they listed the threats. So they had this meeting, and apparently, if this is true, they decided that, okay, enough is enough. Now we need to do this. But do this is an unpredictable thing. It's like jumping off a cliff. We don't know if it's going to work well or if it's going to be unsuccessful and we have a prolonged, very unpleasant thing. I think it's going to work well because all the briefings seem to say they don't expect that this is going to take a whole lot of time. 3 to 10 days, something like that. Could be some power outages, but we'll be a lot happier on the other side, supposedly, if this is real. So, next slide. I was told last month that the military is not going to wait for the results of this stuff that's going on, where they're counting things up and recounting, right? Because they have all the evidence, including confessions, such as one from the former director of the Clowns, Gina, who was shot by special forces during a raid in Europe 2 months ago and is currently sipping lattes at Guantanamo. Well, she's probably not sipping lattes. I don't think that's a very fun place to be. But they said they're not going to wait for the results because they have all the evidence, and it includes a confession from the former director of the company. I mean, I'm excited. I mean, this is crazy. And yeah, once again, go ahead, take the channel if you want to, but I want to get this information out because it's more important right now that I get this out than whether I'm worried about that. Next one. This is the general whose account has a lot of members, and maybe it's really him. In the past, it looked like it certainly was, and there's a lot of interesting things that come out on this account that I don't think have any other explanation except that it's a real person. So soon, this guy whose name ends in I and starts with an F will have to go in hiding. Apparently something far worse is going to be coming out about him than what we're already hearing, which is already very bad. And then he says, how to get a new E, expose the blankety blank, got to do that first, I guess, dismantle the inside job lie, forensic A's in certain states, pressure on judges with data evidence, enjoy the show. Now here's another thing. You remember I told you last time that Quinn actually changed accounts and all of a sudden he made a new one that had real at the beginning? Well, now that official real one that he's publicly acknowledged, this is his account, and he's acknowledging that. He's taking credit for this one. He never took credit for the other one. But this one is him. It is Quinn, okay? Check out what he just said, folks. We are called to engage in liberty, raise the flag, say the pledge, more is coming, get ready. So let me just rearrange the words for you a little bit. Get ready, we are called to engage. Now, what do you think that might mean? Get ready might indicate get ready in terms of being prepared for the possibility of a power outage. We are called to engage. We could represent the notes of the meeting that this other insider I was just showing you said took place, a classified meeting of generals where they say they need to engage. Well, that's exactly what Quinn is saying, that they're called to engage. And then he gives you this. He gives you this image of the flag with a rainbow behind it, suggesting the possibility again of a rebirth, because the rainbow is a symbol of rebirth. The pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, the leprechaun stuff. There's a lot of positive symbolism here. And the rainbow, again, usually symbolizes like the glory after a rainstorm. You have the storm is bad. We've talked about the storm quite a bit. They've used that metaphor quite a bit. After the storm, you get a rainbow. So here he is saying, we are called to engage, get ready, and then he shows you the rainbow after the storm. Let's look at this one now. And again, there's tons and tons and tons of these kinds of things that come out, and we see many of these. So again, the question that I was asking before is, are benevolent ETs helping out this process in some way? Are we in fact being guided through some sort of higher intelligence so that these things don't fly off the rails? And I believe the answer is yes. And so it is becoming kind of old hat in ufology now that, yeah, you know, UFOs show up over these nuke installations and they power everything down. They can't use the weapons. Everything goes offline. There's no electricity. Even the radioactivity doesn't work anymore. They become radioactively inert. And then it just goes away and the lights come back on, everything's fine. Although, apparently, sometime in 1990 or 1991, all of the weapons on both sides of the Cold War were all melted down. I talk about that, for example, in Above Majestic, the movie that we made. So, and also there was a very interesting Sri Yantra pattern, a mandala that showed up in an Oregon Oregon, I guess they would call it, dry lake bed. It might be that people built it. There's sort of like this idea that people actually did build it, but even if they did, I think they were influenced to do it by higher consciousness so that the same result would be achieved, which is that there was a marker put down at the time that these weapons were destroyed by the ETs. They've made it very clear for many, many years they are not going to let us do anything crazy to ruin the planet. So for that same reason, I don't believe that some sort of outrageous flip into a totalitarian world is going to happen either. They could try, but there are cycles in place that have to be followed in which we have to get this global awakening. And to me, what we're seeing on Earth right now is a very clear example of the hero's journey. And we're right at the point where the villain is about to be exposed and where really amazing, triumphant things are going to happen. So back to the slide. In the 1950s, the ETs gave their own disclosure. So this is another extremely, extremely important point that I want to bring up to you. We're going to get the official disclosure, but the ETs that are the good guys have already said through other sources they don't like to talk to the national security state. Can you imagine? I can't imagine why. But they don't like the deception, they don't like the trickery, and so what they prefer to do apparently is contact private individuals who have the right spiritual vibration, and then those people are given the messages that they want humanity to know. So the first story of 1950s ET contact is of a group that called themselves the Acri. So let's go to the slide, you see how that's spelled. And this comes from, there's a wonderful documentary called Il Caso Amicizia, which translates out of Italian into English as The Friendship Case. This is the picture of the documentary. And it says here, this is a UFOfandom.com. It's a UFO wiki, okay? The Friendship Case, Amicizia means friendship, is an extraterrestrial contact case that began in 1956 in Europe, involving many hundreds of people in several countries. So I'm going to read a little bit from this. The Friendship Case started in Pescara, Italy in 1956. Writer Bruno Samaciccia was considered the main contactee who started all this and then got other people involved. Also included in this group were Stefano Breccia, Gaspare de Lama, and his wife Mirella. And Breccia's respected status as an academician and a scientist inspired Gaspare de Lama to come forward with his story as of, I guess, somewhere in around 2010, I think, or 2009 is when this happened. So here's a picture of Bruno Samaciccia. Now, apparently what was going on with Bruno Samaciccia is that these beings felt that he had the right vibration. He had the right intentions, the right focus, that they contacted him. So what exactly is it that happened? Human-looking beings showed up for Bruno, and they began communicating. Apparently, this included getting taken on board their UFO craft. They had bases underground, and he and others were brought into these bases for extended periods of time. Some of these people stayed with the beings and never left. Very strange things were happening. For example, Bruno and others who were involved in this could go into a room, and then they would put a tape recorder in place, and then they would hit record, and a voice would appear on the tape when you played it back. And it was this interesting, very hypnotic sounding voice that was saying very positive spiritual things. They would have objects materialize in the room, and those objects included sometimes things like a crumpled up message that was actually written out on a piece of paper for them. And these beings would appear in front of them. They looked like us. They looked human. Some of them were shorter. Some of them were taller. And they let us know that they really were interested in helping us. So I want to read you a little more from the UFO Wiki first here. So we talked about, again, how Breccia's respected status as an academician and a scientist inspired Gaspare de Lama to come forward with this story. So here is Stefano Breccia, and here is Gaspare de Lama. And so if you go to ivancecchi.it, this is the first iteration of his disclosure when he made this video. It is fascinating, and then it turned into this documentary on Italian television. So here's Gaspare de Lama today. And here he is posing with Stefano Breccia. I believe he's on the right. And this is back in like the 1950s when this was happening. So these two guys both were contacted by these beings, and really, really interesting things started to happen. So Bruno referred to the beings as the W56, and it was simply the year that the contact started, 1956, and I forget what the W is for. He said that they told him, and this again is in person, so he didn't have to like wonder if he was getting real information. They showed up in this case. The W56 are a group of beings who have been on Earth for millennia. They are scientifically and spiritually advanced way beyond what we have. They can project their physical bodies to either be tall or small. They can make it range from 1 to 6 meters in height, and they appear a lot like human beings. They identify themselves as the Akri, and they said that they have a Sanskrit way of writing their name that is accurate, and so this apparently is the original Sanskrit for Akri. How many tattoos am I going to get now of the Akri on people's arms when they see me in the grocery store? Probably a lot. You want to tattoo that? Go ahead. It's totally cool with me. So this is some reenactments, some pictures that were drawn for the television show of these beings. So you got a tall one and a short one coming in. And the tall one, this is kind of what he looked like based on an eyewitness reconstruction. And this is, these are the three guys, Gaspare, Bruno, and I forget the other guy. But there was a core team, and so you can see the size reference. I mean, this guy, the tall guy, was literally twice as tall as they were. And so they met on the beach, and they all had these very cool interactions, and then eventually they would always walk off, and they would go somewhere else. So contactees, many being scientists, this is important because of their credibility factor. These are not, just fools. These are very credible, high-level people. They were in regular communication with a group of benevolent human-like beings who called themselves the Akri, and they were primarily operating out of bases that are underground and underwater. Although there were hundreds of clear photographs, movie sequences, and tape recordings that showed a variety of extraterrestrial craft and even some of their crew, this case is little known even in the UFO community. The primary reason for the high level of secrecy was that the case was continuing and many of those involved wanted to remain incognito. So apparently, people were continuing to get these contacts with these beings that included UFO rides and going underground to see their bases up through the late 1970s. So mid-1950s through late 1970s, over 2 decades of these interactions. And so just to give you a sense of how high level some of these people were, back to the slide, one of the people who was keenly involved in this was Consul Alberto Perego, a major high-level government official in Italy who did not want to get dragged into all this stuff and be called a UFO fanatic. But yet, these were all happening. People were getting these contacts. So in 2009, there's the right date. I knew it was somewhere around there. Engineer and university professor Stefano Breccia broke the silence and openly spoke about the friendship case for the first time, really. This whole thing had been completely lost in history. Breccia's involvement with these beings and with the principal humans involved had been deep and lasted for many years, and Breccia had formed a close personal friendship with some of these beings. And we're going to read from what I believe is his words in just a minute here. The first book he came out with was called Mass Contacts. There have been other books since then. I had a hard time getting through this. It wasn't like the tightest read. He's a scientist, and so it's not like a user-friendly necessarily read, but there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. As an engineer, he was naturally interested in their technology, and he studied it up close. On at least one occasion, he was allowed to fly in one of the Acre's craft for some 90 minutes and could observe its functions. Well, not only that, but supposedly the ETs allowed people to photograph the controls inside their ship. So if you watch Il Caso dell'Amicizia, these are the actual photos. I know, it's really cool. The photos of apparently what are the controls inside this thing. So here it is tilted to the side, and then here it is zoomed in. And so you can see it's very strange looking. It doesn't at all look conventional, but how do we know how this works? It could be something that is involving the use of telekinetic or telepathic energy. I don't know, but supposedly this is real. And here is a picture of Gaspare da Lama's hand as he's pointing to some of the photographs that were taken of these Acri. Now, I found this thing on openminds.tv that actually clarifies the case very nicely. It was published on November 5th, 2009. So, and I don't have any animations on this one, it looks like. So you get the whole thing at once. That's my bad. Anyway, there's the link, and so Open Minds says, or actually no, this is an article they copied, and I believe that he's talking about Breccia. This is my opinion, but we don't really know if it's Breccia. It could have been Gaspare da Lama, but I think it was Breccia. And again, in 2009, Breccia went forward, so this all makes good sense that it was him. In October 2008, a person got in touch with me who, having learned that I was interested in crop circles, wanted to make my acquaintance. I went to meet him, we talked for more than an hour, and then this person asked me if I could help him divulge a very important story in an objective way. This person could not, for some reasons, come out in the open himself, thus he needed an intermediary, which was this person. So again, this I believe is Stefano Breccia. All right, let me fix a couple of these slides real quick, everybody, because I want to I'm so obsessive about this. I've got to have, the flash bulbs are on this one. Okay, good. There we go. No problemo. Oh, it's only one flash bulb. All right, well, we don't have time to fix that, so we're just going to keep moving. Sorry about the lack of bullet points. The story of friendship, or simply the story as we always called it, is a true one. It involved a group, and I believe this is Stefano reading, so this is his testimony. So I've skipped ahead now to where he's telling you what he experienced, okay? And I've never seen anything else that gets this specific, so this is the best resource. It involved a group of Italian and non-Italian people for many years between 1956 and, in his case, 1990. So these ETs were still contacting him all the way up to 1990. Some of these people, including myself, are still alive. We had direct face-to-face meetings with the friends, also called the W56, who are extraterrestrials coming both from planets in our own galaxy at a distance of 100,000 light years and from other galaxies. That's interesting. Here on the Earth, they reached the maximum number of 200. I guess there was some kind of law they had where they couldn't have more than 200 people here. So they had their maximum number of 200 people living inside underground and undersea bases, some of them along the Adriatic coast at a depth of about 20 kilometers or 12 miles. So now this is a scene from the documentary on Italian television that shows you the location of one of these underground facilities. This is what it would look like from the top down, and then this is where it would look if you see it underneath the ground. So this, interestingly enough, what they say in the documentary is that these bases are temporary. They're created by some sort of process where all the ground underneath the earth is simply pushed off to the side by some kind of energetic technology that they have. And it becomes a much thicker, solid mass around the edges of this room, okay? So you have a room that's like a big rectangle that they created the room. And here's where it gets interesting. They have to make sure that the power system is always running because the whole thing is constantly at risk of snapping back and closing on them if they don't leave the power on. Where it gets very bizarre and more like what you would expect with extraterrestrials is that apparently if the group that the ETs were contacting did not sufficiently work in a two-way fashion with them, if they didn't have a give and take, then the ETs wouldn't be allowed to stay on Earth. They wouldn't be, their technology wouldn't keep the base open and it would close up on them actually. So what sadly eventually happened is that the people in this group, enough of them went negative that the ETs did have to withdraw. They couldn't keep the bases open anymore. The technology apparently won't hold the ground open for them unless they're authorized to be here. So this is where it's really cool because a relationship got formed with these beings where if you want to get the rides, if you want to go see their underground facility, you want to go tour their UFO for 90 minutes, you want to hang out with them, you have to pay for it. And this is a common thing, actually. A lot of people in this world want everything for nothing, but these beings actually said, if you want us to work with you, you have to help us too, and we're going to help each other. So what did they want as payment? Interestingly enough, they asked for things like clothing and food. So in the storyline, what we hear is that these people, in order to continue to be in contact with these ETs, they would load up truckloads filled with fruits and vegetables and groceries, or clothing, or in some cases both. They would have the driver park the truck, and go in for like a 1-hour lunch break, and then they would tell him, we're going to unload the truck while you're gone. What actually would happen, according to the documentary, is that all of the items inside the truck would vanish instantly. The beings could portal them out anytime they wanted. And so really what was important is the group, and you remember there was some wealthy people in this group, so they were paying for the food, paying for the clothes, and then making sure that these deliveries happen with the truck at the right time at the right place. This was part of how the contract was established. So the higher beings are specific about this. They're not just going to hand you things. You also have to give something back, and that's part of the initiation. Okay, so back to the slide once again. The first historical base was located under the area of Ascoli Piceno, a small town in central Italy. Now I shall briefly refer to things that derive exclusively from what I was involved in personally during an extensive part of my life and from our direct conversations with the friends. I have live voice recordings of these, or viva voce, with the friends' own voices. So here's the thing, folks. Let's just say that disclosure becomes a big deal. Let's just say that the people that are giving us disclosure try to come out and say, well, the beings have never talked to us. We don't know what they want. We don't know what they've said. They've never said anything. That is a lie. I'm sorry. Maybe I shouldn't be that specific. Let's just say it might not be true. But either way, however you want to frame this, we as a society should not tolerate a partial disclosure because the people I'm talking to are saying you're only going to get 1% of what we really know here. So even apart from all the other stuff, let's go back to the 1950s and let's look at what these beings had to say. Well, look, people like, if either of these guys are still alive, and hopefully they'll stay alive, Gaspare de Lama, Stefano Breccia, they should be asked. This story about the Italian case should be brought back up, and the reason why is that there are hundreds of photographs, there's voice recordings of the beings talking. The beings would pose for pictures. They would actually tell you, go at this point at this time, we will show up in the sky and you can take pictures of us, and it actually worked. You're going to see those pictures in just a minute. Let's go back to the slide. So friendship gathers together various ET populations that are different from each other, both as regarding their physical characteristics, as in there are tall, small, and giant friends, and their provenance. There are friends from other universes and dimensions. However, all of these beings share a fundamental choice towards good, i.e. they are what we would call the positive, benevolent ETs, right? Human ETs. Friendship is a sort of transversal confederation on the basis of a common ideal of life and thought, though great diversifications remain between populations and individuals and between personal choices. This is the very opposite of ideological standardization. And apparently, again, he got to meet them in person, so he's speaking from an informed perspective. And once we start to realize that UFOs are real, why wouldn't they have done something like this in the 1950s, especially with all the hardcore evidence that was left behind and the impeccable credibility of the literal hundreds of people who were involved in this thing? The population whom we personally interacted with is composed of individuals, men and women like us, who are physically very beautiful. This is important. So they look great. Some about 3 meters or 10 feet tall, while others are quite tiny. However, these are secondary aspects only. What is important is what they represent beyond the various typologies and endless folkloristic singularities. The friends are our elder brothers. They are human. Indeed, in comparison, it's we terrestrials who are less than human. They are much more human than we are. This is the first time I've ever heard this. This is really cool. They are much more human than we are, and that is why they do not show themselves. They are too human. For us, it is easy to flatter them, but envying them is even easier due to their perfect humanness. So the idea here is that these people look great, they're in amazing physical shape, they're stunning to be around, and they have all these abilities that if we were more human, and our pineal gland is activated, let's say, then we would have these abilities, because the human being is much more powerful than what we have now. And the human being appears over and over and over again all throughout our galaxy and likely throughout the universe. And if Christians have a hard time with that, then once we get back to the idea that the Logos, the Christ, was the mind of the galaxy, if Jesus comes here to embody the Logos, then that would mean that other planets could have beings that look human as well, and they all ultimately are part of the Christ. And that, why limit the Christ, right? If we're finding all these intelligent planets where intelligent life could occur because they got liquid water, and NASA's now saying we got potentially 40 billion of them that are Earth-like just in our galaxy, 40 billion Earth-like planets in our galaxy. This is official NASA. You've seen me say this before. It kind of makes more sense that there would be some sort of universal mind that everybody would be governed with if you look at this idea of one infinite creator, cosmic consciousness, and a living organic biological universe, right? So sure enough, human can go a lot farther than it does here, and so these beings are actually more human than we are. Isn't that something? Back to the slide. Other populations in the universe have chosen evil. And so he's saying there are good and evil ETs. This is very important. And evil is often represented by the adoration of energy and knowledge science. Well, there you go. This dualism between good and evil is fundamental in order to understand both the still ongoing struggle, which is the struggle over who's going to win this thing, the good guys, the bad guys, and why it is so hard for truth to be disclosed to the inhabitants of our planet. The struggle between good and evil has always existed and is real. It is not an invention or a stage effect. This is all coming to a head right now, folks. So these beings were telling him all this stuff beginning in 1956 or whenever he got contacted. The wicked are not the result of a failed scientific experiment. They can freely choose to change and follow the good. That's nice. This struggle between good and evil also entered the life of the terrestrials in our group and transformed them into particular beings. And again, what ends up happening is, when you hear the documentary, some of the people started to behave selfishly and the beings had to withdraw. And so they lost their ability to work with this large of a group of people because of the selfishness of certain members. In other words, if you start turning negative, the beings will cut you off and they will ghost you, essentially. And that appears to be what happened here. Back to the slide. We had various types of experiences, both mental, moral, and phenomenal. So we had face-to-face encounters with some of the friends. We had conversations with them. We saw their saucers and other flying objects that had different shapes. And we had very close sightings of materializations and dematerializations. He's talking here about things like physical objects popping into the room in the middle of thin air. They just show up and fall to the ground. There's a lot of that stuff that happened to them. There were visits and even long stays inside the underground bases. So this is a very significant contact. And again, up until now, for the most part, we've had a very dismissive attitude about UFOs in the mainstream media, in the global community. People want to laugh, they like to make fun of people, they like to insult. This is not something to be insulted. So what we're going to show you now is the magazine from Italy, Domenica del Corriere, and this magazine features photographs that were staged by these beings. And before you look at these photographs, I want to remind you that they were extensively, there's hundreds of these photographs, I'm only going to show you a few. They've been extensively analyzed by forensic experts for decades, and no one has ever found any evidence of foul play or it being smaller objects that were thrown up into the air and photographed, nothing like that. There is no credible evidence of fraud here. And in these cases where these photographs were taken, you had groups of people who all saw the same thing, in some cases while the pictures were being taken. So this is amazing. These very likely are real UFOs that you're going to see from the good guys, the benevolent human ETs. So here we go. So first of all, I'm going to show you the photograph of the magazine, Domenica del Corriere, and this is the first time that these pictures were published. So what we're seeing right here is one of the posed pictures where they posed for the shot. They said, get outside, and we're going to show up and we'll pose for this picture. So there you go. And if you look at the craft, you can actually see that it has a plasma sphere around it. It has a corona. You can see a nice round circle around the craft. Well, that's probably from its energetic discharge as it's flying in the air. So in this case, interestingly enough, they said that due to the slippage between dimensions, that there is a little area at the top of the craft where it kind of looks black. And this is like some kind of, I guess it's like an event horizon of the wormhole they're using. So the black dot on the top of the craft is not real. It's just an artifact caused by dimensional warping. So other than that, what you're seeing is a nice saucer with a domed roof. And this thing was flying all around. You can see it's the same trees. It's flying through the air. Apparently other people were witnessing this. And it's going in and out of focus as per the background where it's located. So then you have another shot, again showing you this black thing on the top. That's the dimensional warp effect. Here's another interesting shot of it. And here they are getting closer to the ground. These shots, again, have been forensically analyzed. And this is one of the ones where apparently they were able to get it done without the black dot appearing over the craft. So you actually here can see the UFO itself, and you can see the faint outlines of two people who are standing and posing for the picture that was being scripted. Now, of course, so many people have felt, they're emboldened by the mainstream media, at least up until recently, so many people have felt that they can be arrogant, rude, condescending, disrespectful, insult our intelligence as UFO researchers or just UFO enthusiasts. Oh, this is BS. These pictures are staged. It's so fake. It's so phony. They're out of focus. Well, part of the reason why they're out of focus is apparently that they're not quite in our reality here. They're warping in and out of our reality. And you again have to go back to the fact that you have Consul Alberto Perego, a high-ranking military official who was directly involved in this, meeting these beings in person. Hundreds of people involved, top-level scientists, many eyewitnesses, audio recordings, all kinds of stuff that all has come out. So again, back to the slide. Many people saw these tall, giant humans, meeting with them, and they were saying we're going to give this a try. We want to talk to you guys and see if this is going to work, see if we can approach you, see if we can talk to you, tell you some things, and maybe kind of move the ball forward. It didn't really work out that way, but here again is a nice up-close, zoomed-in shot of this craft. Now, is it possible that somebody could fake this? I guess it's possible. But again, the Italians themselves have been studying this for decades, so some armchair researcher who just wants to be loud and arrogant doesn't know as much as the people who've spent decades actually studying the negatives, the original negatives, and finding no evidence of fraud, investigating people under polygraph. They're not lying. This is a huge, huge story. So back to the slide. Now I'm going to read you more about this case. These experiences marked our personal lives deeply and indelibly and caused us to become particularly vulnerable to the laws, regulations, and conventions of our own reality and society where we continued to live and work, with the exception of a few of us who did choose to spend the rest of their lives together with the friends. What we experienced with the friends goes beyond any imagination. Well, doesn't that sound really cool? I don't know. I mean, I would be tempted to just say, yeah, let's go. Let's go. And that actually was mirrored in this movie here, Cocoon, where, you know, the character Wilford Brimley, we won't get sick, we won't get any older, and we won't ever die, right? And so the old people decide they don't want to die, so they all get taken up by the ETs in this beautiful ascension ending for the movie. This might actually not just be fiction, but apparently is based on truth. As a consequence, absolute silence with other people has been the most normal reaction from us, together with our continuous thinking about our experiences over the decades. It was and still is a kind of mental mulling and a constantly growing awareness of what actually happened, together with the realization that it cannot easily be put into words. Doesn't this sound like somebody who actually is telling the truth? Doesn't this sound like somebody who has had an experience or a series of experiences that changed his life so dramatically? Why would he want to talk to people? Why would he want to have everybody go, right? I mean, we know this is what happens. So like, yeah, they're not talking. But finally, they came out with this documentary and we at least got some of the information. Some of us paid a very high price for being singled out, and we were abandoned in our established work and social life patterns. That's very sad. Some of us kept it a total or almost total secret, only opening up to a very few people. Others told the story, but gave a partial or modified version of it on purpose. Isn't that interesting? People weren't telling the whole story. Why? There are many reasons, and they are complex, because there are things that one cannot just say, even when one has decided to speak out. And I will bet you that one of the things that they're not saying yet is the solar flash. Because I'm going to show you in just a minute here other ETs that are probably the same people contacting Americans in the 1950s, and in that case, they did tell us to expect a solar flash. So we're going to get there in a minute. But also, I don't want to run this forever. We're already an hour and a half in, believe it or not, although I did start 10 minutes late. Back to the slide. Furthermore, much of the information has been heavily distorted, trivialized, manipulated, and interpreted in totally arbitrary ways. There has also been contradictory information given, so that a thing has been said and immediately afterwards contradicted, thus generating doubts and in the end incredulity on the part of the readers or listeners. The presence of the friends among us is subordinated to certain laws that they have to follow that depend on factors that are hard to explain in words, for they belong to the subtle levels, that is, the non-physical levels of reality. Among these, there is the law of ambiguity, duplicity, and deception, since this characterizes the condition of terrestrial humans. Well, here we go. This is exactly what I expected to see, and I just found this today to make this particular article where we got a lot more clarity, and I'm so glad that I found it. The law of ambiguity, duplicity, and deception. How could that possibly be good? Well, in the law of one, they talk about it all the time, and they call it the first distortion of the law of one, which is the law of free will. And what they say is, and the other thing that the law of one calls it, very similar to this, and maybe it was the same terminology, it's just getting translated out of Italian, they called it the law of confusion. And they said it is very important that they not give us absolute solid proof of their existence on a global level, because if they did, and then people saw that these were beings with godlike abilities, they understand universal law and what happens well enough to know that a good percentage of the population would then start worshiping them as the gods that have returned. But they don't want to be worshipped. They want us to go up to their level. They want us to level up to where they are, which is what this ascension is about. So then we're actually greeting them as equals, not as gods. We're greeting them as equals on an equal footing, with equal consciousness, equal understanding, equal emotional maturity, so that we're not constantly thinking about what other people think about us, worried about what we look like, how we sound, and constantly self-doubting and judging ourselves, and then obviously judging other people. So they're trying to bring us to a higher moral and ethical standard, and both sides are arming humans. So the good guys are arming us with telepathic transmissions and other things. They're protecting us from any bad stuff happening on Earth. No catastrophic collapse will be allowed to occur. But at the same time, they're also giving us philosophical teachings. It turns out that the American contacts got a lot more of the philosophy parts, but the commonalities between the Italian accounts and the American accounts are incredible. And I would highly believe that these are the same people, and they just tried it out in two different areas. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. So again, the law of confusion is what the law of one calls it, where, yeah, they'll show up for a few hundred academics in Italy and some people in America. They're not going to show up on a widespread level and just let us know they exist, because people would worship them. So what they have to do is reach certain numbers of people first and level the whole planet up to them. We are now leveling up to them, where they will greet us eventually as brothers and sisters who are equals. Okay, back to the slide. Thus, all these negative elements where they have to hide the existence of themselves, these are not secondary elements. They are a crucial part of the rules of the game. And they can come into play at any moment, including the moment when an attempt toward disclosure is being made, such as at this present moment. And so this is actually what they were saying in the article, but it's way more true now, right? Because these rules could come into play at any moment. So just because people here on Earth think that they're going to do a disclosure of 1% of what they know, if what I've heard is true, and I hope it's not. I hope this disclosure is totally awesome. But I'm expecting that it won't be as much as I want, or any of us really want. Anyway, it opens up the possibility that the ETs could do their own disclosure. The law of confusion is now satisfied because they've come forward. So anything is possible, folks. And this is the ETs themselves telling guys like Gaspare and Stefano and Bruno what's going to be happening in the future. Back to the slide. The Friends are not the only extraterrestrials who have come to the Earth, so they say. Individuals from various other populations are among us, because the Earth is a very particular planet inside the economy of this part of the universe. Others have said that. We've heard that the Earth is like a Garden of Eden, that it has far more complexity in terms of the genetics that it can have on Earth, so that basically almost any life from any other planet could be brought over here and dropped off here, and it will survive if you put it in the right area. There's not a lot of planets that can do that. So apparently we have kind of like a museum of a lot of the best stuff from around the galaxy that's all been put here on Earth in terms of life forms, because this planet can actually handle that. Other planets might not be able to. So again, very interesting correlation between independent testimony that others have said and what these alleged ETs said to the Italians. Back to the slide. The aim of the Friends' presence is not to study us. They know us quite well, in fact, better than we do ourselves. The aim of the Friends' presence is to help us. In fact, the Friends are extremely unhappy about the very high level of hatred, violence, and injustice that we see on the Earth. This is exactly what they say in all the other sources I'm going to be telling you about in our course. And they are very unhappy about the anti-humanistic trend of our science and technology. Being able to see our thoughts and feelings, the Friends can see what we hide behind our masks, words, and smiles. So they're here to help us, and it's a spiritual assistance, right? Other populations are here for other reasons. and the abduction by extraterrestrials of terrestrial humans on Earth, as well as the creation of ET human hybrids, is a reality that the Friends personally told us about as far back as the 1960s. And I mention this because today there is talk in the media about it, and I remember what the Friends said so many years ago. Well, isn't that interesting? Before the alien abduction thing was ever like a big deal, except for maybe Betty and Barney Hill was the first real acknowledged traditional alien abduction in the 1960s. But prior to that, there was nothing. And it wasn't like the Betty and Barney Hill story really got all that popular at the time. So here's a case where somebody independently was told the same thing that later came true. And that's interesting. That's validation. If you assume that he is a credible insider. One more time back to the slide. The Friends told us a lot, and yet they only told us a very small part of what they know, including what they know about the activities of other populations already among us, such as when you feel that your best friend or your lover is telling you the truth. That's the kind of thing people say when they really have the experience, right? Compared with all the other populations visiting the Earth, the Friends have a quite peculiar and precious characteristic to offer us. They have a very special and close connection with the subtle levels that regulate the destiny of our planet, the destiny meaning are we going to have a positive planet or a global fascist dictatorship? So they have a close connection to that. They're going to make sure it doesn't go down the negative road. And they're connected with what they call the soul of the universe, beyond the physical or phenomenal level. Thus, the Friends have a sort of general control over everything that occurs on Earth, including what's happening now, but they are only allowed to intervene under particular conditions. Everything happens as in an extremely elaborate chess game with rules I cannot even touch upon here. But again, the basis of the chess game is that we determine what the ETs can do. Our free will determines what they are allowed to do. That's why when more of us pray or meditate and call upon them for help, they can only act based upon how many people are doing that. In the Law of One, they quantify it and they call it the calling. So if you're wondering what to do and you don't want to spend any money, praying is a darn good one because it's free. But when you do that, each new person who's praying, according to the Law of One series, which again is derived out of this 1950s ET tradition, it's the logical outcropping of it. It was based on people's Law of One came out of, okay? The Law of One started with these 1950s contacts. And it is a Christian, ultimately a Christian teaching. It affirms the reality of the Christhood of Jesus. It does do that. It says that he was the embodiment of the galactic mind. But for me, the real validation is in the hundreds of scientific points that it makes that I was able to independently confirm. And I've done this throughout 4 books now, and there's a lot of it in the new book, Awakening in the Dream, as well. So we have to authorize both the positive and the negative. So both sides have to play by these rules. When we're dealing, let's go with the wide shot real quick. When we're dealing with the cabal, their rules are, okay, they have to tell us what they're doing. So what do? They advertise it in all these movies with all-seeing eye, black and white tile floor, the Masonic arch, the square and compass symbol is sometimes used. There's a bunch of these symbols that have appeared and a lot of themes that have appeared. So and again, the Great Pyramid on the back of the dollar, right, with the all-seeing eye on top of it, that's another example of them hiding it out in the open. This is what is normally being done. This is the way they normally work, okay? And these rules basically are that we humans have to be inspired by these beings, inspired by their message. We have to take personal action. So the personal action is to not just sit there and wait for something to happen, but from these beings' perspective, yes, do they want works, as Christians would call it? Yes, to a degree, they do. They want you to go out there and do positive works. But a single moment of pure consciousness means more to these beings than a lifetime of works. So if you really develop your meditation, and if you can get to the true state of nirvana or samadhi or whatever these ancient traditions called it, just you as a soul reaching out to the one infinite creator, making that handshake and getting that telepathic interaction in your meditation, which is what I'm gearing the classes for on Sunday now. If you go to ascensionmysteryschool.com, every Sunday I'm leading you through these guided meditations that will help you connect with your higher self, and they're very beneficial. So when you can make that connection, then you are actually helping even more than any other method. So truly, honestly, the most important thing we should all be doing is trying to live in a meditative state throughout our lives, trying to not get angry, because there's so many things that can make you angry right now. There's so many things that can make you sad. There's so many things that can make you depressed. That all lowers your frequency, for lack of a better term. So, and then people are like, well, David, you should do more global meditations. Well, we're doing them, twice a week now, now that we're in the middle of this class. But anyway, the most important thing you can do is to try to be peaceful all the time, to try to be happy, to try to have loving thoughts, and to try to have forgiveness for the people who are around you, whether it's your own immediate family and friends or whether it's people that you're meeting just in the course of your day when you go to the store. What these beings want for you to become is a person who's cheerful, who inspires other people, who actually makes them feel good about themselves when you talk to them. You're lifting them up instead of knocking them down. You're getting them to smile. You're getting them to feel loved. And then you're creating other people who are inspired. And then they go out and create other people who are inspired. It all sounds like a big old hippie 1960s kumbaya, right? But that's what the being's message really is. We all are going through something on earth that is unveiling the negativity so that we can look at it and choose to do something different. So again, do you think that it matters when you're getting mad? Yes, it does. It does matter when you have a moment of anger. It does matter when you have sadness. Now, I'm not saying you should avoid these emotions. In fact, it's very negative to repress these emotions and not honor them and not honor what they're telling you. This is one of the things that traditional religion sometimes lures people into, is this kind of self-martyrdom that can happen. But instead of the self-martyrdom, what's more important is embracing the service to others philosophy, gearing your life towards being a positive person, being a loving person, being an accepting person, a patient person, a forgiving person. It's such a simple message. It's the message of ageless wisdom. Any human being who taps into cosmic consciousness will immediately start downloading the same kinds of concepts. And the Law of One even tells you that the two basic concepts that you're going to download first is to meditate and to be more loving. It's not going to get more complex. The message isn't a complex message. It isn't hard to understand. It's just that we get caught up in our own delusions, and we don't realize what's really going on, that we're in a class. Life on Earth is a class, and there's a hidden agenda, and there are teachers, and they're studying this. So is Santa Claus real? No. But is something like Santa Claus real, where he's keeping a list of who's naughty and nice? Absolutely 100%. And the stocking and what gets filled in your stocking has yet to be revealed, but we have a pretty good idea of what to expect, because if you do this, if you're actually going to go out there, if what I'm telling you today inspires you to be a nice person, and you're going to go out there and kick butt and be this really cool, amazing soul, then guess what? I'm going to go way over here now. You're doing the right thing. You're doing the right thing. So it's so simple. There's not a whole lot of difficulty or complexity to this. Did you like the pink shirt, by the way? I figured it's 1950s. I'm going to wear a pink shirt and green pants. And that way I'll hit it out of the park with everybody who's trying to take bets on what color my shirt is going to be. I'm sorry, all you people that bet blue, you lost. You got to pay up. Sorry about that. But anyway, yeah, so somebody here says, Tracy says, it's the message of God. He said to keep forgiving someone no matter how many times they hurt you. Ray Okidoki says, perfect love casts out all fear. The actual feeling of giving love is a frequency that is felt as a feedback in itself, and that is what heals DNA. As JC said, in giving you receive, what you sow, so shall you reap. So you guys are so smart. I mean, like, you already know a lot of this stuff, so I only want to really tell you things that are new. Ageless wisdom is great, and I'll remind you of it, but you guys already know. These beings don't change, and whether it's an ancient Zoroastrian or Hindu prophecy, or whether it's in the 1950s, it's just be nice. Is it so freaking hard to be nice? Can we just be friendly? Can we just be cool to each other? Wouldn't the planet be really nice You wouldn't need to fight wars anymore because there's no countries trying to take over the planet anymore because everybody's being nice. And then we could use the military to explore space and peacefully heal the planet. We have all these troops. If they didn't have to fight wars, then we could get them doing other stuff. And that's, with the company that I've been developing, we have a garbage technology, and this is real. You know, these units cost about $30 million to make. But if you have one of these units, you can put in municipal solid waste, which is the name for trash. They call it MSW. And it can, the $30 million unit can do, I believe, 1,000 metric tons a day. And what comes out is 1 million gallons of distilled water a day and 100,000 gallons of diesel fuel. There's no atmospheric byproducts, folks. There's no atmospheric emissions. There's no pollution. You don't smell anything. The only thing you get is liquid water, diesel fuel, which we desperately need, especially after what just happened in the southeast United States, and you also get carbon black, which you could use for a fertilizer for crops. Look, I know the people who are doing this. I've seen the prototype. My wife has seen the prototype. We have films of it working. So we have the prototype. That's one of the hardest things with a tech upstart is people are like, well, do you have a prototype? Well, yes, we do. We can show you the prototype. We can show you films of it running. We can get it up and running again. Right now, I know where it is, and it's not running at the moment, but we could easily get it set up again. So we are in the process of raising funds. There's some very promising things going on. I'm not going to talk about it at all until we actually have it, but it looks really good. So there's a lot of excitement going on because why wouldn't we want to make this garbage technology? Why wouldn't we want to start cleaning up the trash? Because if enough of these are built, then we could actually not make any trash anymore. All of our trash could be converted into useful things like water and fuel. And if you say, oh, fuel, even if we got anti-gravity and free energy, which I think we're going to get, it's going to take probably 20 years for society to change enough where everybody has access to these vehicles. Wouldn't it be cool during that time if we start processing all of our trash and turning it into fuel, turning it into gasoline, trash to cash? And the other thing that's really cool for anybody who's investing in this is that after only 3 years of running the machine at 1,000 tons a day, the fuel that it generates is more than enough to pay for the cost of the machine. So what literally happens is after 3 years, if you invest this initial amount of money, after that period of time, all it does is make profit and clean up the earth. How could that be bad? It couldn't be bad. The only way it might not make profit is if fuel becomes valueless because everybody's got free energy. But again, even if we get that declassified in this disclosure, which there's some hints that they might do something like this, and the Salvatore Pais patents already, there's a compact fusion reactor that he has, which is way over Unity, and he has an anti-gravity machine called the Hawk, or the Hybrid Air Underwater Craft, which they've already said apparently works. And they've alluded to the fact they already have this. It looks like a flying triangle. So, isn't it something that here we are today, going through all this stuff, trying to understand what in the world is going on over in D.C.? Is there an event that's getting ready to happen? Are they going to do nothing? Or are they going to do something? And if so, what are they going to do? When are they going to do it? How are they going to do it? And what is the relationship with disclosure apparently happening somewhere around June 15th? We're hearing that it's probably going to be closer to June 15th rather than June 1st. Well, it could all be leading up to some really, really cool stuff, but I don't want to see disclosure. I don't want to see the authorities telling us that this is all we know, and only the information that we told you is credible. And all the other information there is to know, oh, well, they're lying, and they're lying, and they're lying, and they're lying, and they're lying. Oh, David Wilcock, F him. We're not even going to talk about that guy. And blimps, stealth blimp? Oh, come on. I'm afraid that could happen. I'm afraid that they're going to try to sideline all other information except for their information. But look, the UFO subject is so vast, there's just warehouses full of data. And probably warehouses full of crashed disks, too, at Wright-Patterson or wherever the hell they are. And we deserve to know the truth. So enough of lying. Guys, you got to stop lying. And so when we go back to this, we need to go back to, yes, the ETs tried very hard to let us know they exist through groups of people in the 1950s, but the negativity on this earth was so high that these people were intimidated and they never really came forward to the degree that they wanted. In fact, the Americans did more to get the message out after they were contacted in the 1950s than the Italians did, because the Americans led to entire works of words where the beings themselves came through and gave their philosophy. So on Sunday, it's not 4:44 right now, but it was just 4:44. On Sunday, I'm going to go through a lot more of this kind of information, but it's extremely fascinating. Okay, back to the slide. Compared with the science and technology of the other extraterrestrial populations, the science and technology of the Friends is quite different and singular, because their technology is shaped directly upon the laws of the world of the spirit. Isn't that something? It is a science and technology that has no connection at all with ours, including our most innovative aspects of quantum mechanics. Yet, the Friends also have another and more usual science and technology that they partially tried to share with us, especially in the fields of electromagnetism, and I think we're going to see what that is in just a minute here. But this aroused feelings of avidity, which means greed or jealousy, I guess, possession, competition, and omnipotence in us. So the Friends retired from this sharing project. This is a critical statement to make, okay? When you read the Law of One, they said that they contacted people in the 1950s and that the people's egos got involved. They started to think they were hot stuff. They started to berate other people. They started to think they were gods, that they were special. One of the things I've learned, and by having, dream and telepathic interaction with these benevolent beings since, the dream started in 1992, 92, and then the telepathic stuff started in 1996, 4 years later, after I had done my dream research every morning. I wrote down the dreams, remembered them, wrote them down, studied them, analyzed them, and got pretty clear about what the messages were and how I was being guided. It became telepathic for me in 1996. And the Law of One does tell us that they contacted people in the 1950s, they got egoically involved, and they realized we can't reach people in person. It gets too religious, it gets too weird. The only way we can really work now is telepathically. So I only got telepathic contact. Many others in today's world have only gotten telepathic contact. There's evidence that in-person contact might have been resumed, but it's very, very rare if it ever happens at all. Usually they're going to reach you telepathically. It will start in your dreams. You will hear things in your mind. You will think that it's nothing. You will think it's just your imagination, but there's going to be this so-called still small voice. Once you understand meditation, according to the Law of One, you're not supposed to block out all your thoughts. You're just supposed to not be thinking them. There's a difference. When you start to meditate, you will learn there's a difference between the thoughts that you think and the thoughts that arise spontaneously without any effort and without any doing on your part when you're in a deep meditative state. According to the Law of One, that is the voice of the Creator. So even if you don't take Ascension Mystery School, which again, ascensionmysteryschool.com, the 3.0, the granddaddy, where I'm going to summarize everything together, it's already started. People are blown away by what I'm doing. And it's all high quality, re-uploaded into your Kajabi account afterwards. Everybody gets a Kajabi account. We've had a lot of trouble with this in customer service, by the way. So please, if you've already signed up, all you have to do is log into Kajabi with your username and password that you already created. And if you did another account with us before, it's probably going to be the same username and password. Log into the website that we give you in your email, type in your username and password, then you'll get into an area where you can see the files, and you can click on them, you can download them. If you re-upload them, we're going to penalize you. So we already have that set up where it's going to be blocked if you try to put it online again. And so please don't do that, because you will be liable. And we do have lawyers now. So we don't want you stealing it, but if you buy the class, you can obviously download it and own it forever. And you have a whole year to do that. Your Kajabi account will be open for a year. So that's just a housekeeping thing. All you have to do, go to your Kajabi, use your username and password, log in. You'll see where the files are. You click on the one you want. You can either click on it and it'll start playing, or you can download it and then you can use it. Or you can watch it live on Sunday, and those instructions have been sent. But during the week or any other time, you can just get it out of Kajabi. I just wanted to make that clear. And I think my customer service team is very, very, very happy that I just told you that, because we are doing hundreds of support emails a day. So please, again, if your email doesn't get answered fast enough, I want you to understand that we're getting hundreds of letters and we have very few staff, so we're working as quickly as possible to answer your emails. But it might not be right away, okay? So please just be nice to everybody. They're working 11 hours a day. They're working really hard, and we're really happy that for their effort. So we're doing as quick as we can. Anyway, back to the slide. So again, they said that the contacts aroused feelings of jealousy, possession, competition, and omnipotence. Exactly the same thing it says in Law of One, and he obviously didn't read it, so that to me is verification. The Friends, look at this, this is wonderful. The Friends have won a great war in the universe against the evil populations, but the game on the earth is still completely open. Both the minds of us terrestrials in the group, forever linked to the Friends by an ancient pact, and the minds of the terrestrials whom we address, as is happening now, which includes you hearing this right now in this live stream, this is how we're involved in this war. And let me just look at one thing real quick here. Oh yeah, we got 10,500 concurrent viewers right now. So we are way over the minimum grade that we need for the meditation effect to kick in. So we almost 11,000, 10,391 is right now. It's going up and down. That's awesome. Thank you guys for showing up. And I hope that this is worth it. And I hope that most people are telling me don't be worried about the length, but I am going to keep it under 3 hours. So the minds of you, you listening to this, as you're hearing this, you are involved. And again, it's because if I and the beings that I'm talking about, if we can inspire you to just be a little bit more friendly, a little bit more patient, a little bit more forgiving, a little bit less angry, a little bit less judgmental, a little bit less jealous, then we've accomplished what the whole mission of our thing on earth is for, is just to get you to be nicer, just to mellow out and relax, you know? And people are so riled up right now. And it's like, look, it's going to be okay. The world is an illusion. It's not material. It's not made of physical matter. Matter is a projection of consciousness. That's what these beings tell you. Everything is a thought. And therefore, everything is malleable. There is no destined outcome that your life is going to be on. If you think, oh no, I'm not going to make it, you still definitely have time to change that. If you think about how many times a day that your thoughts and actions are going to cause stress in people, anxiety in people, fear in people, anger in people, defensiveness. If you're the one that's making other people defensive, if you're the one who is like always angry and everybody has to apologize to you, and I'm not going to hold you accountable, okay? If somebody else is sitting next to you, don't like nod your head, okay? But if that's you, and you're routinely confrontational and all this kind of stuff, you're not getting it. Your life is not doing what it needs to do. Our goal is to be nice and to be positive and patient. Patience is one of the hardest ones, man. And forgiveness is one of the hardest ones, if not the hardest one. The negative don't have the strength. This is the thing. They think they're so powerful. They think they're so tough. And they're taking over the world, right? But they don't have enough strength to let go of things. They don't have the emotional maturity to be able to forgive. That's why, if they were smart, if I was going to try to play for the negative side, and this is a total thought experiment, because that's the way I like to do things. I like to play chess. Let's take a thought experiment. In my mind, if I was running the negative, and they were going to do this in January, and just kind of take over, right? I would like hold off for a year. I would want people to have a good solid year where they think everything's cool before I show them anything crazy. But if you start trying to do all this stuff, massive tax increases, massive job slashing, and now something that's becoming widely acknowledged and unprecedented in world history for a country of this size. Well, maybe not, because it's happened before, but to pay people, to bribe people, literally a nationwide bribe to not go and do your job, to not go work. And it's actually working really well. I forget what it is, but like 35% of Americans right now are living entirely on benefits. 35%? That's like a third, more than a third of everyone. 1 out of 3 people are not working. What? And it's, okay, I get it. I get it. It's really cool to get $800 a week if you're not used to even making $800 a week. But what they're trying to do is make it so that everything collapses. So they're giving you a little bit of a bribe now so that we on our own, through our own collective laziness, and they think we're all lazy, folks. I'm not lazy, but they think that we're lazy. If enough of us are lazy and we take the bubble money, we take the helicopter money, nobody goes and does anything, society collapses, and we did it to ourselves, but we did it because we like $800 more than we like the planet being safe. That's the latest crazy thing that's going on. Everybody's got this choice now. Well, do I take door number 1 or door number 2? Do I take the money or do I take the hard work? Well, look, the money might not be bad for a while. Maybe you need a break. Maybe you've been working hard your whole life and you need some time off. I did it, okay? And look what happened afterwards. I lost, I don't even know how much, probably 35 pounds, I would guess. I don't always want to be doing this in front of the public because frankly we have very intense opposition. And then when the system itself starts to turn against you, and if you talk about stuff that you just get wiped out, it becomes even more of a buzzkill to want to do this. But right now, obviously, everything is looking really hot. We're in a very, very intense moment here, and don't expect it to stay like this very long. This is a kinetic moment of change, rapid change. Let me just read some comments here. Oh, somebody, Ruby Coley Holly says, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Ray Okidoki says, the compassion of the wicked ignorant is cruelty. That's the proverb. You can only love as you know how to love. It's going too fast. I can't read all this, but Ariel Darkstar just said, less hours. You guys want me to stop? Is that really true? I don't know. I could stop. But I mean, I have some other information that I'd like to get through first. So yeah, let's just blow through this and not keep talking. Because I want to get to one other point before we end, and I can probably keep it to 2.5 hours. In fact, and this is so critical, folks, I'm so glad I saw this just today. This war, quote unquote, also is taking place in our most intimate spheres, like whether you take the money or whether you make sure the planet isn't going to collapse because nobody's working, right? Which one are you going to do here? The war takes place in our most intimate spheres and on levels we are unaware of, which makes the whole matter very difficult and hard to express. The teachings of the Friends have not yet been divulged. Well, not in Italy, but they did in America. But when they are, they will allow us to deal with this intricate conceptual and experiential muddle with a new awareness. Transcendence of what we also call God is at the very core of the teachings of the Friends. This should not be confused with the soul of the universe we mentioned above. Here we have the very opposite of pantheism. This is monotheism. This is one God, right? For now, however, I am obliged to stop here, though this spiritual message is by far the most important point and the main reason for the Friends' presence among us, as they themselves told us. And so again, just to summarize some other notes here, and I'm really sorry that I didn't have these animated right. That kind of stuff drives me nuts as an OCD guy. But whatever. It's not that big of a deal. So in summary, hundreds of people with high social and cultural status were involved. The documentary tells us that there were other European countries that were having similar contacts, and we also find out that it was happening in Siberia, South America, and Australia during the same time frame. And again, the extraterrestrials were physically materializing in front of people. They had telekinetic ability. They allowed their ships to be photographed. They took people on board the ship. They took people into their underground bases. And the message from them, again, is we need to go in and solve these final mysteries. Whoops. See, if I hit the button the wrong way, it becomes very unprofessional. So these U.S. contact cases gave us more of the message. You do not want to miss this part, folks. So there was 3 Georges in the U.S. contactee cases. They're not the only people, but they were sort of the most prominent ones. You have George Adamski, you have George Van Tassel, and you have George Hunt Williamson. So these are the three Georges. Now, George Adamski is the guy I'm going to talk about the least of the American contactees, but he, among other things, did have a very strange radial pattern around his belly button that was like a scar. And apparently they removed this organ that I heard about from people in the DS called the omenta. Supposedly there's a very, very dangerous surgery you can have where this placental material from your mother called the omenta, it's rich in blood vessels and it's intermingled with your intestines around the belly button. What these people in the cabal apparently have done is they cut that thing out because it's got your mother's DNA in it and your antibodies are constantly attacking it. Supposedly it greatly weakens your immune system if you have it, and if you have it removed, then you get a lot healthier. I had heard about that operation. It's very dangerous because it's so easy to bleed out if it's not done right. So it's extremely dangerous. I do not recommend it, but supposedly a lot of DS people were getting this done. Therefore, having heard that already, when I went back and read about Adamski and that he had this cutout scar around his belly button that looks like a jagged edge around it, well, yeah, that's probably what they did. They probably wanted to keep him around longer, and they knew that if you take this thing out and you do it right, that you actually, apparently the people that get the omenta taken out, you don't get sick at all. Your immune system is much, much better. But again, if you eat superfoods and you do the right thing, you don't get sick anyway, and you don't need to have some crazy dangerous surgery. So again, I don't recommend the surgery, if you could even figure out how to get one. So now we have the next guy here, George Van Tassel, and he essentially became kind of like the godfather of the modern UFO contactee movement. He got the money together, he was a pilot, and he got big money together. And what he did here is he built these UFO gatherings in Giant Rock, which is a little area of Joshua Tree. Now, Giant Rock is supposedly the largest freestanding boulder in the world, or at least one of the largest freestanding boulders in the world. Here's a picture of someone standing on top of it. And I will also say that the Native Americans believed that this mountain had incredible energetic properties. Well, sure enough, when you have a gigantic single piece of stone, you're going to get an effect very similar to a pyramid. That stone mass is actually transforming the energy that's all around us that I call the source field. The consciousness itself is transforming and raising in this area. So if you're around Giant Rock, you will get this consciousness enhancement. And believe me, when I went there, I could feel it. I could feel it big time. Let's see another picture of Giant Rock now. Back to the slide. So here, I guess for a little while, somebody hauled a car up to the top, so you can see how massive this thing is. And then they actually built a restaurant/meditation gathering room underneath the rock. They actually hollowed it out. It's no longer there. It's been filled in. But at the time, this is what it looked like. There was a whole cool little restaurant down there. You could actually get served food, and they would meditate and get ready for these UFO contacts. So here's another picture of the area that was underneath Giant Rock that you could go to. Here's a collage of a variety of different pictures, again, of the Giant Rock thing. Now, what's important is that every year they were having these UFO gatherings there where thousands of people would get together and celebrate their knowledge of ufology, and some of this included alleged contactees. So the name of the restaurant was called the Come On In, I-N-N, really funny pun. So here's the picture of that. So this is George Van Tassel and his wife, and they ran this restaurant. And it is reported that Howard Hughes would land his plane just for a piece of pie made by Van Tassel's wife, Eva, above. So yes, so Howard Hughes, and they talk about this in Law of One too a little bit. Howard Hughes was the big money guy. So Howard Hughes was flying in his aircraft. There was a private airstrip in Joshua Tree that he could land on at the time. And he would go directly underneath Giant Rock and have dinner or lunch in this Come On In restaurant. George Van Tassel also ended up working with the beings that were being contacted here and tried to build a machine that, if it was successful, would have been a portaling device where people could have actually portaled off to where the ETs wanted them to go. We have to meet them halfway. We build part of the work. George Van Tassel actually started building this machine called the Integratron. But according to the law of one, the rules were broken, and the ETs therefore withheld the final instructions that would have made this machine actually work. So you can go to the Integratron today. You can go visit it. The building is still there. It's all made out of wood, just like a pyramid, or at least most of it was. And there's an area in the middle that you can stand in where there's a tube kind of thing up to the top. You can look through the top and see a little hole. And the acoustics are incredible. You hear all the sounds from around the room, and it's a very interesting kind of time-warping acoustic effect that you get when you're standing in the middle or sitting in the middle of the thing. Plus, another very strange thing I noticed in the Integratron is that two people can be whispering to each other across the room, and based on its very unique acoustics, you can hear their whispering all the way across the room like it's happening right next to you. All of these acoustic properties apparently also helped this energetic aspect happen where it could have functioned as a portal, but the beings were very specific in saying that it has to be available to everyone. Apparently, Howard Hughes' wealthy friends said, we're going to spend the first 2 years and use it just for the people who put in the millions of dollars, and then we'll let it go for everybody else. And they had firmly decided nobody's getting in there except for the people who paid for it and their close friends for the first 2 years. That decision is why the beings pulled out. Similar things apparently happened in Italy, as Stefano Breccia was telling us, because we just can't handle it. So we weren't really ready, mature enough for this technology yet, but they tried. So back to the slide. So there is Giant Rock Airport, because again, it's very flat, so Howard Hughes could land there. That's what it was called. So they had these huge, huge annual UFO gatherings that did literally attract about 5,000 people standing out there in the middle of the hot desert, and they got their beach umbrellas. And they did it, I think, in like March, April, so it was still starting to get pretty freaking hot out there. And among the people who would visit were various people who claimed that extraterrestrials were contacting them in person, and in this case, this woman said, my flight to Venus. So she is one of the contactees who was allegedly taken on board the ships and flown off to a cool place like Venus. Here's another slide where it says Giant Rock Interplanetary Airport Aircraft Welcome. Typical for a UFO conference, right? Well, this was in 1954. So here is George Van Tassel posing in front of the Integratron, which he says the Integratron is a time machine for basic research on rejuvenation, anti-gravity, and time travel. So you can go there, and you can see it in the background. Originally, by the way, the entire dome was built to lift up off of the bottom of the building and be able to rotate on its own gimbal. Okay? That part of the construction was actually never completed, but apparently the rotation of the entire structure was part of how it was going to work. And I'm sure it would have been fine, except that, again, he wanted to only have it for the rich people for the first 2 years, and the being said, no, you're done, cut you off. Very sad, but that's what actually happened. So in the next slide here, we have George Van Tassel on nightly television, discussing his contact with the television show host Long John Nebel. The space visitor, whose name was Solganda, spoke English to him, said Van Tassel. So Van Tassel was one of the people who had ETs showing up in person in Joshua Tree. They looked human, and they took them on board the ships. Yeah, that sounds familiar. Sounds like exactly what we were just talking about in Italy during the exact same period of time, except remember, Gaspare, no, who was the first guy's name? Bruno Samaciccia. He was the first one to get contacted. That wasn't until 1956. So what I think might have happened is that the beings were starting to see the Van Tassel thing go off the rails, the Integratron thing, they had to pull the plug, and then they said, well, okay, maybe this avenue isn't really working. Maybe we shouldn't give them so much philosophy. Let's go somewhere else on Earth and let's try again. Let's contact them in person, tell them who we are, tell them that we mean peace. We come in peace, and let's just see what happens. And unfortunately, they got disappointed. In that case, it wasn't until the late 1970s they had to cut everything off with most people. But again, they didn't really get what they wanted out of doing this because people are not ready. They either think they're a god or they get a big ego, or then other people start worshiping them, and none of this is what the beings want. Okay, back to the slide. So people were being contacted and there were communications happening. And how did these communications occur and what did they say? Well, the first thing we're going to explore is what may have been the very first attempt these ETs made by radio telegraph. Now you might say to yourself, what the heck is radio telegraph? If you look at the picture here, I'll cut back to it in just a second. It's the idea of sending Morse code over shortwave radio. Because sometimes in shortwave it's so weak that you can't make out what somebody's saying. You know, all this kind of nonsense. But you can hear even if it's really, really staticky. So it's a very secure way to communicate wirelessly. It was essentially the original email, other than the fact that you could just pick up the telephone and call somebody. But radio is more cool, and back then long-distance calling was almost impossible, so you could play around with shortwave and get a lot of stuff done. So according to the other George Hunt Williamson, there was a group of people who were being contacted beginning in 1952 where they were ham radio operators. And they have the radio in their house, and they're communicating with people by telegraph, but then very precise signals start coming in. And the precision indicated that it was done digitally, which of course we wouldn't have had in 1952, but the beings totally would. So these communications were very precise, very fast, almost as if they were done mechanically, which again I believe they were. But what starts to happen is that it's an intelligence that's communicating with the people, and it starts telling them that they are extraterrestrials, that they came from elsewhere, that they have motherships, that they're here to help us. And in some of these cases, once trust was established, the being said, go out into the backyard. And people would go out into their backyard after being told to do this, and a craft appears, and it actually takes them on a ride. So several of the people who are the 1950s American ET contactees, apparently there was 6 groups where they were, at least 6 groups in the book that we're going to see, where they were contacted by radio telegraph, and then they actually got an in-person contact where the beings appeared to them in person. After these in-person contacts, usually what would happen is that it would change over from in-person to telepathy. Once you identified the beings, once you identified what it's like to be around them and the telepathic communication that you can have with them in person, then you could recognize it when they weren't there in person, and that's the way they preferred to communicate. And they gave us some very, very amazing messages through this particular method. Now let's go back to the slide. So Dr. Wilbert B. Smith was the Canadian radio communications engineer who ended up getting brought in to investigate these radio telegraph communications, and he was also a recipient. He was one of the 6 groups that started to have this happen directly to him. So the contacts began in 1952. Oh, and I guess instead of 6, it was 12, because these slides were taken right out of the book. So 12 different groups. I was off by half. 12 different groups were independently contacted. And W.B. Smith was one of the people who was personally contacted by his radio telegraph. And George Hunt Williamson, who apparently his real name was Michel de Brenovich, he wrote this book called The Saucers Speak on these 1952 and above contacts. He did not reveal W.B. Smith's identity, but if you go to presidentialufo.com, which is Grant Cameron's website, he's one of the great UFO researchers in my view. Grant has some great documents on there that clearly show communication happening between W.B. Smith and George Hunt Williamson, and additionally to that, the questioner for the Law of One, his name was Dr. Don Elkins. He was personal friends with George Hunt Williamson, and so in his copy of the book, which I saw when I stayed at their place, L&L Research in Louisville, Kentucky, in the margin where it says the scientist in George Hunt Williamson's book, he wrote in W.B. Smith, because Williamson told him it was W.B. Smith. So if you actually see that, it's written in there. So I guess we could ask L&L to take a picture of that part of the book where he wrote in that that's who it was, but it's not necessary. The point is there's documents on presidentialufo.com between Williamson and W.B. Smith. So that's who the scientist is if you go find this book, The Saucers Speak, which is a very amazing book even today. Back to the slide. So the ETs explained that our solar system, if you summarize what all the different stuff was saying, this is the total of what they say. The ETs explained that our solar system was moving into a more highly energized region of our galaxy, that this would create measurable increases in cosmic ray bombardment, and our entire solar system would be transformed by this process. Well, doesn't this sound familiar? And they gave this message to world governments. Well, yes, so in short, if you come back on Sunday, go to ascensionmysteryschool.com, sign up there. We have a payment plan now, so it's $111 a month for 3 months. Or if you took one of my classes before, you can sign up for $222, but that's a one-time payment, okay? Anyway, we're going to go through these 1950s emails. Well, they're like emails, right? But they're transmissions. And we know actually who got the right stuff. So let's keep going here. So back to the slide. W.B. Smith's identity was hidden in the books because he had a security clearance with the Canadian government. And as I said, the telegraph messages eventually switched to in-person contacts, which then led to direct telepathy, where people are getting telepathic messages and they would dictate them and write them down. Okay, so Smith, at these yearly giant rock events, there were various people who claimed that they were having telepathic contact with ETs. And somehow, enough of them figured out, okay, there's like a Woodstock for UFOs. I want to go there. So every year in the 1950s, W.B. Smith was going to these conferences. He was meeting the contactees, and he was talking to them and finding out if they were accurate or not. And so, going back to the slide, Wilbert Smith created a 100-part questionnaire to examine all of these would-be telepaths. And this questionnaire was based upon things like, questions that only he knew the answer to. So a small number of these people all across the country gave answers to the questions that were nearly identical. And in fact, discrepancies in their answers were later explained by the sources as their own personal biases and predilections tampering with the data. So this is really, really interesting. A certain number of people all across the planet, or whoever was at these giant rock conventions, were getting interviewed. He has a very precise list of 100 questions that are specific questions, and he tells you what some of the questions are. And approximately, I don't know how many people, but a certain number of these people, a handful of them, all answered these 100 questions that are very specific exactly the same way. And some of the questions had answers that he knew the answer to, but only because he had a classified government clearance. So if you don't have a clearance, why would you know the answer? Well, if the ETs know the answer and they tell you, then that's why you would know the answer. So this was a very, very rigorous vetting process, and it produced a series of people who actually passed and who gave accurate information. Well, thanks to the pioneering work of Dr. Don Elkins and L&L Research, we captured those books. We know what these people said. We know what the authenticated 1950s contacts said. And it's very intricate, but we're going to go through some of the best stuff on Sunday. But really what they end up telling us is that the solar system is going to go through a massive transformation. The sun is going to change. It's going to give off a bunch of energy. The orbits of the planets will change. Doesn't this sound familiar? David, isn't this exactly what all the other prophecies you told us before were saying, whether it's Zoroastrian prophecy, Egyptian prophecy, Hindu prophecy, Zoroastrian prophecy, Greek prophecy, Roman prophecy, boom, 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 boom. It goes on and on and on and on. So many different things. Islam talks about it. Christianity talks about it. Judaism talks about it. Mithraism talks about it. It's everywhere. And now we have to kind of re-educate ourselves because this knowledge didn't disappear. It just kind of got buried. So that's why I'm digging this stuff up, because if it was ever important, it's important now. So the bottom line, which I'm going to make a lot more clear on Sunday, is that the 1950s ETs completely reiterated what the ancient prophecies were saying, even though it appears that the contactees were not aware of those prophecies. Because in these books, you don't hear them talking about how, what these people are saying is the same as what it said in Zoroastrianism. It's the same as what it said in Islam. You don't hear that. These people got it independently. And again, to me, this further underlines that the ETs are real, and this is what they want us to know. And they have a message, and the message is get ready because a big, big evolutionary quantum leap is coming, and there's cycles that you have to go through before you can enjoy this. Now, Stefano and those other guys out there in Italy, Bruno Samaciccia, etc., we also heard that they got technological information and that this is when everything started to go wrong. Well, apparently this is the second time they tried this because technological information was also given to the contactees in America. One of the things that W.B. Smith said is, hey, because W.B. Smith started making friends with the people who were really in contact with the ETs, and so he starts interviewing the ETs directly using these people as telepathic conduits. And apparently the woman he liked and used the most was Frances Swan. And based on how much time I have, I think we're going to do it on Sunday, not today. There's some amazing stuff that Frances Swan had. You're going to see documents from the FBI of FBI agents that went to meet her at her house. I think it was in Maine, in a really small, humble house. And the beings actually began trying to communicate with them by doing some pretty interesting things that scared them. Noises in their ears, huge, amazing like sound pressure that went through their whole bodies, and the beings were trying to set up a mass contact. They were trying to use these FBI agents to talk to our government, and they said they had 5,000 motherships that they wanted to appear in our skies with. So we're going to get into all that on Sunday. So again, ascensionmysteryschool.com if you want to see all that stuff. I don't have time to do it right now. So in the technology that W.B. Smith said, hey, look, how are we supposed to know that you guys are real? Could you give us some cool technology or something? Could you teach us something new? Well, what they did is they said, yes, we will teach you that there are areas of reduced binding. Now, reduced binding apparently means that the ship, like an airplane, could have a very bad accident as it's flying through space in certain areas. That there are these energetic fields on Earth where at certain times the rivets will liquefy. The metal literally liquefies at room temperature and the plane just comes apart. You don't want that to happen, so they taught us how to find out where these zones are so that we don't fly our planes through them. They actually taught us how to do this. And it's essentially a subtle energy or vortex energy detecting device that they built. And if I made these myself, I could probably sell them. I've never actually done that, but here we go. So this technology allowed him to measure what we could call the global grid, this geomagnetic grid on Earth. Well, here's the bottom line. All you have to do is take a fishing line and stretch it almost to the point where it's going to break. And this puts unique stresses on the atoms, which apparently cause subtle energy to become much more responsive. So we actually have a surviving picture of this detector. So what you're seeing here is exactly how it needs to be built. This is what the ETs told us through this telepathic contact. You have brass caps on the top and bottom of an aluminum tube. Inside is a nylon fiber, and you have to stretch it really, really tight right before it would actually snap and break. And the way you put it under that compression is that steel spring that you see there at the bottom. Then the only other thing you're doing is you wrap the wire, the monofilament, around a spindle, and the spindle is connected to a needle which then has a numerical gauge to give you a sense of what number of strength you are at. So the story goes that the monofilament will expand and contract depending on where you are, and you could easily tell where these vortex points are. Now, according to the 1950s data, they actually tested this, and what they found was that there were these circular areas. They're like large circles, and they slowly move. They don't stay still. But apparently there's a big one around Toronto, and that it was a problem because it would cause buildings to be weak, and they would try to build the building properly, but then some of the bolts would liquefy, and the building would start collapsing while it was under construction, and they'd have to do it all again. So this is something that would happen pretty often, this binding problem and planes coming apart. So I don't know if anybody's even built these successfully now. This is the kind of thing you need some R&D for. But it's one of the things that they did. Now, the other thing they did is they gave you the detector, but then they gave you the generator. So you have to be able to generate the beam as well as to be able to detect the beam, right? Because if you could generate the beam, then you got the beginning of the thing, and that's where you can start to actually have a usable technology, including something, right, that could potentially be like a Wi-Fi internet, but without electromagnetism. That would be cool. If we could use these fields, there's lots of ways that we could benefit from it. So back to the slide. They call it the caduceus coil. And the caduceus is essentially based on this idea of the two snakes entwined. But what you do here, and please don't do this at home, but I can't really stop you. But like, if you're going to build this, don't aim it at anybody, okay? Because that's very dangerous and bad. So please don't do that. But what you do here is you have an iron core, ferrite as it says, and then you take these wires and you wrap them across the core in the DNA spiral shape. Oh, interesting. When you do this, and this is an example of somebody who did this, this is Jean-Louis Naudin in 2005, who took just a simple old copper wire and wrapped it around what looks like a toilet paper tube. And then all you have to do is run the current through this. And then he has, I guess, a soliton detector, and sure enough, when you run current through this thing, you get this wave response on the other side. Now here's another example of somebody who built one of these with the iron core and the wire that wraps around it. So the way that the contactees told us this works is that you will be able to run current through this wire that's wrapped around the core, and you will see the current dropping. You will see that some of your energy is disappearing, but you don't know where it is. Apparently, when you cross a 90-degree angle of electromagnetic fields, and you take two electromagnetic fields and you collide them at 9 degrees, and I'm probably getting in a lot of trouble now. There's some people that don't want me to tell you this, believe me, because this is the secret to a whole lot of technology, okay? 9-degree crosses in the wires, and then it creates a non-physical energy beam that you can generate in one place. It'll travel right through a brick wall. You won't notice anything. But on the other side, with the little fishing wire thing, you can detect the beam, and it works. So eventually, I believe that this could be used for very positive purposes, because if this technology is done properly, it can heal. If it's done improperly, it can cause damage. So this is not something to play around with. So again, if you actually do try to build one of these, please don't aim it at anyone, because it probably won't hurt them that badly. A coil of this size isn't going to do too much, if anything. But just please be sensitive to that if you try to experiment with this. Back to the slide now. So, what are the conclusions that W.B. Smith came up with as a result of all this stuff? The conclusions were telepathic communication is very real and can be repeated. Different sources were giving nearly identical answers to these technical classified questions. And the bottom line is that they think something is going to happen throughout our entire solar system. Now, next I want to read you, we're not going to cut back to me yet. This is the actual scan that I took of the paper that is a transcript of W.B. Smith's talk that he gave live in 1958 in front of a conference called Why I Believe in the Reality of Spacecraft. And in Ascension Mystery School, I'm going to give you the links to all these documents so that you can read them. AscensionMysterySchool.com again. I'm just going to go through it quickly enough. If you want to read all of it, I'm pausing enough here that you'll have the time to do that. And the whole document also is on llresearch.org, by the way. They have an archive in there where this and other things are located. So this is the thing that I actually wanted to read to you, okay? And this is about how he was asking these 100 questions. The procedure in checking contacts was to ask a number of innocuous but significant questions and compare the answers with the answers to the same questions that we obtained through other contacts. The questions were of the type like this. Do people live on the planet Mars? If so, what is the general shape of their houses? That's pretty darn specific, right? Are there people on Mars, and what do their houses look like? If everybody starts answering the same question, well, we know there's people on Mars. We know there's bases on Mars. We have humans on Mars. Do people on Mars use coin money? If so, what does it look like? Holy crap, that specific? Yes. Altogether, some 100 or more questions were involved. The results were spectacular, to say the least. Among the contacts who might be classed as authentic, there was almost complete agreement. Among the other alleged contactees, there was extremely poor agreement or none at all. Of course, where agreement was general but one or two points didn't fit, an effort was made to find out the reason for the discrepancy. In each case, it was found that someone had injected a terrestrial idea or comment, frequently of a religious nature, instead of transmitting faithfully that which was received. So one of the things that the beings would have trouble with is people wanting to throw in a bunch of Christian jargon. I remember one time when I was in Virginia Beach and I was working for a singing group called Sounds of Joy, and I played percussion for them. We would go to senior citizens' homes and do chorus. So we'd do Christmas songs, other stuff during the year. I liked it, and I did it for a long time, and it was fun to bring joy to those people. But one day I was trying to go to a rehearsal, and I went to the wrong place, and I ended up going to a church on a Wednesday night gathering that they had. And what I saw was that the pastor was giving really good information that seemed to be coming directly from source. In other words, I believe that this particular pastor was getting a telepathic contact with benevolent angelic beings. And he would say things that were so beautiful and so deeply meaningful and inspiring, but also it was like he'd kind of get a thought idea and then he'd have to get another one. And the way that he would get the next one is he'd say, and we're washed in the blood of the Lamb, and the Christ, the holy blood of Jesus is coming down upon us. And he'd do this. So he had a standard set of things that were in that vein, that were usually the same kinds of sentences or very similar sentences, and he'd say maybe 4 or 5 of them. And that would be like what would jumpstart him to get another download, and then he wouldn't say any of that stuff, and all of a sudden he's talking again in this very interesting way, and I'm like, yeah, this sounds just like what the beings say. So we have the gift. Everybody has the gift. When you speak from the heart, when you speak from a place of inspiration, you will at least be partially guided, partially inspired by positive beings. And the more that you can learn to meditate and get yourself out of the way, the better. So what was happening in this case is that people were getting mostly the right information telepathically, but then they feel like they need to throw something in about Jesus. And sure enough, the beings say, well, okay, yeah, I mean, most of what we said here was right, but here they kind of steered it a little bit too far into a religious vein. So that's about the only thing that was happening incorrectly with the people who were answering questions like, what do the houses on Mars look like, and what kind of coins are they using, and what do the coins look like, if they use coin money at all? How do you get all these people that answer these crazy questions the same way? Occam's razor. Maybe ETs are real and maybe they're actually talking to these people. Wouldn't that be something? Oh my God. Maybe just like Edgar Cayce. How else did he know what these people's medical problems were? 14,000 times documented. We're going to have to deal with the fact there's higher beings and that they're talking, okay? And what are they telling us? They're telling us to get ready for the solar flash. So, but this is the thing I wanted you to see. So back to the slide. So it was frequently things of a religious nature that were the only distortions we were getting. So now I'm going to read some more stuff. Here's another page you can peruse. This is, again, a photocopy I took. And here's the last page. And so I want to read you this first. And I'm going to read you 2 more excerpts after this. One of the most important things I had to realize was that we are not alone. The human race in the form of man, which again, this is 1950s, right? So now it would be humans. The human race extends throughout the universe and is incredibly ancient. There's humans everywhere, just like everybody else has been telling us, right? Also, the appearance of the human in physical form is only one of its many manifestations along its path of spiritual progress. Whoa, that's cool. Our civilization here on this earth is only one of many that have come and gone. This planet has been colonized many times by people from elsewhere, and our present human race are blood brothers of these ancient ancestors, these lineages. Isn't that interesting? Is it any wonder that they are interested in us? To orthodox thinkers, this may seem strange, but not nearly as strange as our ideas on random evolution. I am informed that science is really much more simple than we imagine, and all the component parts fit together perfectly without any corrections. Well, they told him that in the 1950s, then they gave us the proof in the 1980s in the Law of One. And that's what I'm now doing, is putting all that science together. And it is amazing. Possibly, we should start over again and reassemble our knowledge in a different pattern, and this time fit the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together properly without trimming the edges. I feel sure that if we were to do this and accept the philosophy upon which this new approach must by necessity be based, we will be able to enjoy the technology and the way of life, which is demonstrated to us by the presence of the spacecraft and our brothers from elsewhere. So exciting. All this stuff about science, and that's what we're doing in this class, by the way. So this is the most exciting thing of all. These people from elsewhere have much greater knowledge than we have regarding the sequences which must not be altered. And while they have every desire in the world to help us, they may not do so at this time without running the risk of significantly altering sequences that are very necessary for our development. Let's just stop right there for a second. The sequences that are very necessary for our development, if you understand what these ETs teach us, because remember, the 1950s contacts, that we're going to give you a lot more of those on Sunday, they directly segued into the Law of One. Two of the beings that were supposedly being contacted in the Brown Notebook by Walt Rogers, you'll hear a lot of this on Sunday. The Brown Notebook has Hatan and Latwi as the two main beings that supposedly were talking. Carla Ruckert and Don Elkins were reading this Brown Notebook extensively, and it essentially tuned them. So this is another really cool thing that the Law of One teaches you. When you expose yourself to the extraterrestrial knowledge, they claim, much like the Gnostic concepts, and this is one area in which I really love Gnosticism. I don't like the demiurge thing, but I love this part. Living information. Information that is alive. And not only that, but information that once you come in contact with it, it actually gestates your spirit body. It creates an awakening. There's a frequent metaphor in these spiritual traditions of an egg. It's called the Orphic egg a lot of times. The idea being that you in your current form are like an egg, but most people never hatch out of the egg. To crack the eggshell and to actually be reborn, that only happens when you come into contact with this living information. The information is alive, and therefore certain concepts, if I simply tell you the concepts, those concepts are alive, and it reawakens, according to these ETs, some part of you that already knows that this is true. And then that's called attunement. And so when you start attuning to what they call the living information, the information that is alive, right? When you attune to living information, it gestates this process. You become the Orphic egg. You are then reborn. And this is why Jesus does say in the New Testament that you must be born again. Yeah, there's a lot of born-again Christians who have really, really, in some cases, grossly offended others, and nobody wants to hear this stuff. Oh, born again. God, just come on, David. I can't stand this. Look, I want to be clear on this, folks. I knew that the Great Pyramid was a monument to the coming Christ in 1996. I knew in 1996 that the Law of One series was very Christian and validated the divinity of Jesus. Says that he is the embodiment of the Logos, the galactic mind. Okay, so, but here's the deal. I grew up in a family where Christianity was not seen favorably. My mother had really bad experiences with it, and I understand why. Okay? So I didn't want to link the Law of One to Christianity. I resented the link, actually, for a long time. I didn't want all this religion at all. So you may have noticed, if you've been following my career through the 1990s and through the double zeros, did I ever link the Law of One to Christianity? No. Did I ever link the pyramid to Christianity? No. Why am I doing it now? Because I think I've grown up a little bit. I've gotten more mature, I hope. And in my maturation, I said, you know what? I don't want what I want. I want what thy will is to be done. What does the Creator want? And it's like, wait a minute, David. If you know that the Law of One is Christian and you know that the pyramid is Christian, you really ought to tell people. And don't worry about it. And in fact, what the Law of One teaches us is so much more interesting than regular religion that, like, yeah, it's linked to Christianity, but it would be as if the seraphim come back and say, okay, you guys, we're going to give you a lot more because things have gotten so screwed up that you really need to have this. And that's what I think is going on. And they were starting this in the 1950s. So when you come in contact with living information, you start thinking different thoughts. Why do you think different thoughts? Because the part of you that is a spirit becomes alive and it starts talking. And when you meditate, it will be something you can hear. So this is part of your cosmic awakening, okay? But what are they saying here? If you take these 1950s ETs, all that material was put together, it was stored at L&L Research, they read it, they got attuned. If you study the right stuff, if you hear the living information and you keep exposing yourself to it by reading it and hearing it and watching videos where it's talked about, then you actually become potentially attuned so that they can talk to you directly. In other words, if you expose yourself to living information sufficiently enough, it actually does raise your vibration to a point where, at least temporarily, these beings can speak to you. So, for example, you might then be able to meditate and get yourself into a very blissful consciousness where, if you follow the protocols, you can get this telepathic information fairly cleanly. But again, I always encourage people, don't ever assume that any telepathic source is 100% accurate. Always assume that there are hidden gotchas in there that would be very significant. Now, one more thing that shows you the 1950s ETs never left. I have to jump ahead a little bit here, so let me just do that. And this is the last little thing I want to show you guys because it will blow your doors off. Okay, and then we're going to have a lot more of these prophecies and stuff that we're going to come out with later. Okay, so, and then, okay, got that. So we have, let's go back to the slide now. There's a stunning modern prophecy that has occurred at Giant Rock, and in light of I really am grateful about how much more racial harmony we're getting on Earth. This actually happened to a woman of color. The woman of color is Sri Natha Devi. And she, as you can read here, she is the woman who got this prophecy from the beings, apparently, came through very accurately, as you're going to see why in a minute. This is very shocking, okay? Sri Natha Devi is the founder of Eagle Winds of Enlightenment Center, a small spiritual center in a rough area of Los Angeles. Started almost 30 years ago. She spreads a message of world peace and unity and has been recognized as an international ambassador for peace and universal peacemaker for her service. Now, I haven't actually met her yet. I would be totally open to do so. And when you see what happened to her and how incredible this is, I would say she should be included in disclosure. I would love to see Sri Natha Devi taken seriously, given her honor, and asked what happened to her and to tell the story, because this is unfrickin' believable. And I had to end it with this, okay? Back to the slide. So on February 23rd, 2000, an ancient prophecy was fulfilled in a very, very dramatic way. So according to the prophecy, and this again came to her apparently through basically like a telepathic process, Giant Rock symbolized our Mother Earth, and she had come across a Native American tradition, I guess it was told to her, where the Native Americans were told by these human beings, these human ETs, that one day Giant Rock would actually split open, and that when this happens, a new era would be revealed. So Sri Natha Devi brought a number of powerful healers to the desert. These are people with established track records as healers. They all got together with her at Giant Rock to pray and meditate. The date that this grand summit of all these great healers happened was February 19th and 20th of 2000. During this time, she was apparently getting telepathic information from these angelic souls that were telling her that the earth is going to react to us because not enough people were doing sacred ceremonies. And so these people were told that they should pray for the salvation of the planet, and that if Mother Earth accepted their prayers, the rock would split open on its side and relieve the pressure. If Mother Earth refused their prayers, meaning that we're all doomed, the rock is going to split directly down the middle, and this would foretell a very serious cataclysm on Earth. Now again, this rock had not moved for millions of years. It is the largest freestanding boulder in the world, and remember again, she's telling us, okay, look, the rock is going to split open. Who in the world would be daring enough to make a claim like this? Because if the rock doesn't actually split open, you're done. Like, you lost your credibility. So it's kind of amazing that she was in the right telepathic state to even get this information and trusted enough, but she's obviously been doing this for 30 years. She's a great experienced meditator, and she's been in contact with these people. So they're telling her that the rock is about to split open in the fulfillment of the Native American prophecy, but depending on how it's going to break, whether the prayers are answered, if it breaks down the middle, we're totally screwed. But if it breaks off to one side, then the world is saved and everything's going to be fine. Again, why in the world would giant rock ever break, right? Back to the slide. So this is about what it looked like at the time that she was saying all this stuff. Normal giant rock. Remember, this was February 19th and 20th. 3 days after she was told this by, again, what is probably human beings talking to her telepathically, on February 23rd, 2000, it actually happened. Now, if you are still awake, we got 9,800 people watching this live. If you don't get the arms standing up, if you don't get the hair standing up on your arms when you see this, I don't know if you're really paying attention. Because check this out. She was told this. We have all these witnesses. They documented it. They wrote it down. 3 days later, this is what happened to Giant Rock. You ready? Watch the slide. I mean, my God. My God. It broke right on the side, which means the prayers were accepted. It fulfilled an ancient Native American prophecy at the location where they said it was going to happen, with the rock they said was going to happen with, 3 days after she told people this is about to happen. And again, because it broke on the side, this means that we're saved. So the rock actually split open on Monday morning, February 23rd, 2000, revealing what started as a gleaming white interior. It is long since weathered. The witnesses to her prayer included Father John, a priest from Los Angeles, Lori Joy Pinkham, and Will Clark. After the rock split open, they gathered at Devi's house less than 24 hours later, and when they did, they got 2 rounds of mysterious ball lightning, quote unquote. Probably wasn't even lightning. They saw these orbs, these visible large orbs that shot through the house, first on a north to south line and then east to west. Well, this sounds a lot like the 4 directions, doesn't it? Yes. So Devi said that this appearance of this sphere of energy, which is very likely not lightning but an actual intelligent being, the being went through their house north to south and then east to west in order to let them know that the prayers had been completed, the rock broke successfully, and we are going to be okay for planet Earth. It's kind of a big deal when they tell you that a rock is going to break and then it does. It's kind of a big deal. Sorry, skeptics, if you can't handle this, you got to, I mean, come on. Let's go look at, okay, now here's what it looked like as time went on. You see the shattered piece is starting to weather. There's starting to be stains on where it broke. And here again is what it looks like from the side with more stains, and it's getting more and more weathered. So, in short, folks, this is exactly the kind of thing that you could do if you had anti-gravity. You could take a very thin beam and you kind of just gently nudge the rock apart with anti-gravity, part it in half after you tell people 3 days before that's what you're going to do. You got eyewitnesses. So look, that was in 2000, and what they told us back then is everything is going to be okay. So apparently they knew in 2000 with this prophecy that we were going to be okay. And that is so exciting to me. So we're going to wrap it up here. Did you want to say anything, sweetheart, or you want to play some bowls? Well, do we have any? Okay. Yeah, so come on in, and you can put on that mic, and then we'll unmute it. So, yeah, what we're going to do now is get you into this meditation. But before we do, once again, We're going to go through Francis Swan. We're going to go through all the different prophecies of the solar flash that came through these 1950s contacts, and a lot more really amazing stuff, including more about meditation and how to connect on Sunday. AscensionMysterySchool.com is the website. We are again offering a huge discount of, if you have ever seen any of our stuff before, you get it for $111 off. So that's a really great opportunity. And there's a payment plan. So you can pay $111 and then do that again 2 more times as the months go by, if we're still here. If not, then you're free. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to lead you through a meditation where we're actually putting this into practice, putting this technology, if you will, into an applied science. Because maybe right now, as I'm meditating with you, you might be part of what these beings in the 1950s were telling us is happening through Stefano, that by simply coming in contact with this living information, you are going through metamorphosis. I want to help that metamorphosis along. So without further ado, let's close our eyes. Somebody said, thanks, Dave, awesome. I appreciate that. And now, taking a nice deep breath. And breathing in. And just letting it go. After all these centuries, all these ancient prophecies telling us that the world will be transformed. Are we not surprised to discover that these so-called angelic beings, the word angel translating as messenger, are here today? They never left us. It's very relaxing to realize that the earth is highly watched over, guided, and protected. And if these beings have the ability to split giant rock on command after telling people they were going to do it 3 days before, why would we be so inclined to doubt the greater whole of the prophecies they gave us? Maybe as you keep relaxing more and more, going deeper and deeper, you start to notice that, yes, there are thoughts when you're meditating. It's just that you don't have to work to create them. Pay attention now to what thoughts just naturally arise in your mind as you listen to the bowls and I remain silent for approximately 1 minute. Just listen and hear as you tune in. Any thoughts that you get, any visual impressions you may receive, any voice fragments of speech that you might hear, just now listen. this is yours to do anything you want with. And the more that you learn to just let the thoughts go by, not really grab onto them or try to own them, but just let them flow and experience them without getting too excited. This is the voice of the universe. You have the power to ask the Creator for help and receive direct assistance. You have the power to call for a better world, for peace, for higher and greater technology that incorporates the Spirit. And we ask for this and we affirm this now, today. We affirm our protection. We affirm and acknowledge that these higher level beings needed to stay out of the picture so as to not interrupt cycles that are extremely important for the global awakening of humanity. Cycles that right now have brought us to the precipice of destruction, to the global all is lost point, the dark night of the soul. Feeling this warmth, this living white light, this amazing sentient consciousness, as you keep breathing, just imagine that white light. Imagine that that's all you can see is beautiful, radiant, intelligent, loving, beautiful white light. And maybe you can even tune in to the living information that tells you that this white light is home. When you think of home, the truest, deepest core of what home really means and what it feels like in your body, to have the perfect home, the perfect location, the perfect environment, the perfect view. Nothing you'll ever find on earth will feel anywhere near as much like home as this white light does. If you are lucky enough to experience it in its fullness. Let us now take this white light and send it forth to all those who are working for the liberation of planet Earth at this time, those in the Alliance, those who are undertaking these very dangerous missions with incredible uncertainty. Let's take this time to thank them for their service, to acknowledge their struggle, to let them know that we are aware of what they are doing, and we thank them, and we honor them beyond all else. For this is truly critical work that must be done for the cycles of human evolution that are fulfilling themselves at this time. We ask that they have strength, protection, guidance, durability, and steadfast resolve to complete the mission, and to do so with the least amount of difficulty that is necessary. And then we extend out to all those on earth who are suffering, sad, terrified, fearful of what they are seeing, uncertain as to how these ancient prophecies coming true could be anything but bad, thinking maybe it is the end of the world, having apocalyptic fears. What's next? What's next? Let us also strengthen them and hope that they will learn to have a greater sense of trust, that all of this is being very carefully orchestrated by beings that are far more intelligent than we are. It's all meant to look very natural and organic, not to look like it is being guided and steered by higher intelligence at all. This moment in time on Earth is supposed to look like the dark night of the soul. It's supposed to look like the final abyss, the bottomless pit, the trap from which there is no escape. And if you have found yourself believing that that's what it is, let's just take a moment to reflect upon all the ancient prophecies we've discussed and all the modern contactee reports, hundreds of people getting contacted by human ETs, getting to visit their underground cities, getting to visit their ships, some of them leaving with the ETs and never coming back, which doesn't really sound that bad. People being contacted in the Americas by telegraph and then by telepathy and in person. And once again, the message is that humans are about to evolve into something far more interesting. And all you have to do to be ready is just be nice. So let us again take this energy and send it to the entire planet Earth. Let us strengthen the Earth as our mother, our sentient mother, and tell her that it's going to be okay, that we have your back. We will ensure that this is not going to go off the rails, that we will be safe, and we will co-create the world that we want to see. For where we go one, we go all. And so it is. And now I'd like you to breathe your way back into the room. Wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes. Might want to stretch your back, take a nice deep breath. This is where if I have a live audience, I get everybody to hug each other. I say, give your neighbor a handshake or a hug, whatever you feel is appropriate to you. And that way everybody feels the love a little more. Is that thing about the rock breaking in half not the most stunning thing you've ever seen? I mean, wow. Can you imagine being part of that group where you were told this was going to happen and then it actually does? I will never believe it, I will never believe it. Okay, that's fine. Maybe you need 25,000 more years, I don't know, buddy. But look, this is really compelling information, and it's going to get a lot more intense. It's coming up in a couple days here on Sunday, so if you haven't already signed up, we have reopened the cart. We still have the payment plan in place, ascensionmysteryschool.com. And if you don't want to do that, again, we have the book, about $20, $25, something like that. And most important is to keep meditating and keep your positivity up. Focus on the positive attitude. Focus on the benevolence of what's going on. Don't get caught up by the fear. Don't get caught up in end times mania, because this is apparently what we needed to see so that we can all go together to the source of love. Just like the Quran says, if each nation were to faithfully practice the words of its own holy prophets, again, because I know you got a lot of good stuff that happens when you open up your mouth, and I like that.
Well, it's always a short notice at the end.
I know, I'm sorry about that.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that tonight.
I thought you would. Mm-hmm. I didn't, see, I don't tell her about what I'm going to do so that I get to see what the reaction is.
Yeah, and I had an interesting dream last night where, sometimes in our dreams, these beings, come in, and I had this really beautiful, tall, blonde-haired woman. It was like a very lighter blonde-haired woman coming in my
Maybe it was
dreams.
Solganda. You never know.
YouTube. So if people
That's true.
don't want to take the course with us, then there's probably 30 hours of information.
Yeah, and I'm going to keep cranking it out.
Yes.
And now we have a beautiful studio, so anytime we do something, it's going to look great.
Yeah, so we're excited. We're working really hard to get everybody, into the membership areas, and we're going even deeper into all of this stuff together. So we're continuing. But yeah, the most important thing is that all of us stay positive and happy and taking care of ourselves, patience, staying focused on good things, because our thoughts are so powerful that we are affecting everything. And to keep that focus like a martial artist. And
I'll just say this, we shamelessly flagrantly love you. I hope you don't think that's bad, but it's true. We do love you.
We do this mission because we love the earth, and we love people, and we love animals, and we want to see Eden really here. We want to see a beautiful life, people having a good time, people loving each other, being nice. We want to see the animals being healthy and free, and this earth really is a Garden of Eden. It is such a beautiful planet. We want to see the oceans clean, the water clean, the air clean. So that's a vision that we keep in our mind. That's what we are focused on doing, and that's why we do what we do. So bless you and bless your family. We hope that you stay happy and well.
And thank you for being on this journey with us, and we hope to see you at ascensionmysteryschool.com. Thanks for watching.